Notre Dame fans, welcome back to a special edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is 7:02. Just trying to get a couple things situated here. We are here, obviously, to talk about the commitment of Brennan Vernon to Notre Dame. This is a big one for Notre Dame, and we're going to dive into that. We're going to talk all about his commitment, sort of how things went down. We're going to watch some film. We're going to talk about sort of what's next, what this means for Notre Dame from a recruiting standpoint. And then we'll get into some other things. I'm getting a lot of texts about what's going on at running back. And we obviously, Devin Aupiu just announced that he was going to transfer. So we'll get into that, talk a little bit about that. But to begin the show, we are going to focus on the commitment of Brennan Vernon. Brennan Vernon is a 6'5", 250-pound sophomore rising junior defensive end from Mentor High School in Mentor, Ohio. And look, I got to give Mike Singer props on this one because I said for a while that this was not going to happen. And I was told by a couple buddies that they said, Singer was a lot more confident that he was going to pick Notre Dame. And I said, man, look, I'm from Ohio. I've been following recruiting for 20 years. I've been following Notre Dame recruiting for longer than that. Notre Dame is not going to go into the backyard of Ohio and get a public school non-offensive lineman from a place like Mentor High School. It's just not going to happen. Well, it happened. And Notre Dame has landed Brennan Vernon. This is huge because this is obviously a kid that Ohio State wanted. Brennan Vernon, for those who don't know, is ranked by Rivals.com as the number 9 player in the entire country. He is a 5-star on the composite list for 247 Sports. This is a big time player. This is a gap closer. I don't know if Brennan Vernon is a gap eraser just yet, AST. Thank you for the super chat because he's a sophomore. And so to me, there's some development that needs to happen like it does for all sophomores, but a lot like Keon Keeley, so I found out about this yesterday. This was shortly after Keon Keeley committed. I got a phone call and I was told that Brennan was going to call Ohio State yesterday and let the coaches at Ohio State know, and that he was going to announce tonight at 6 o'clock, which is why I promised y'all a 6 o'clock show. And I did say earlier in the show that, we would have a better idea tomorrow about what's kind of going on with some defensive line recruiting. This was a big part of that. This is a huge commitment, and Notre Dame did an absolutely phenomenal job in this recruitment, getting this commitment. So to me, is he a gap eraser yet? No, but he can be. And when we dive into the film, we'll talk about that. I think the combination, and the same thing with Keon Keeley, it's the combination of those two players with what Notre Dame's already doing in 2023, that if those two players project the way that I think they're capable of projecting, then yes, this is a gap erasing move. Before we dive into Brennan Vernon, I want to address something here real quick when it comes to recruiting right now on the defensive side of the ball, because Marcus Freeman is rightfully getting a ton of credit for this. And his willingness to battle anybody, anywhere for recruits has been amazing. But recruiting at this level, the way that Notre Dame is on defense right now, requires a staff effort. And what I've been saying since he was hired is, to recruit at an elite level, you can't just have a great position coach. I look at Ohio State, and you look at some of the big-time recruits that Larry Johnson has landed over the years. And Larry Johnson has done a great job at Ohio State. But Larry Johnson also had Ryan Day. He had Greg Schiano. He had Chris Ash. He had Jeff Hafley for a year. He's had Greg Schiano. He's had big-time coaches, Kerry Coombs now, big-time recruiters at defensive coordinator, and obviously he had one of the best recruiting head coaches in the business, if not the best recruiting head coach in the business, in Urban Meyer, and Ryan Day's living up to that same reputation. So you can't do this all by yourself when you're going against the elite players. Mike Elson has done a great job of identifying those players that maybe are more developmental type of guys. And he hasn't been able to go win a bunch of those battles because, again, a lot of times he was doing it by himself. He still won his fair share of big-time battles. I mean, you look at Isaiah Foskey, Jordan Patelho, and you look at last year's class with Jason Onye and Gabriel Rubio. You look at what they're doing in 2022, and you say, boy, this is a little different what they're doing in 2022. In 2023 is even more different. And it's not a coincidence that a lot of this is happening when Marcus Freeman came on board. And I'm saying that as a compliment to Mike Elston, too, because It's Coach Elson that's getting you there. And then it's that teamwork, and it's also Brian Kelly, but it's that teamwork that's getting Notre Dame over the top. And this is what I've been saying for a long time, that this is what Notre Dame is capable of. For years, we hear about, oh, Notre Dame can't get the best recruits, and the best recruits don't want to go play Notre Dame. They don't want to go to class and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, you've got a staff that's got Elston, you've got Freeman, you've got Mike Mickens, you've got this staff that's really good recruiters. And all of a sudden, Brian Kelly's more involved in recruiting. And just like that, the defensive recruiting is taken off. And right now, Notre Dame is recruiting the front seven since Marcus Freeman has been hired. I would argue, and I want somebody to try to prove me wrong, that Notre Dame has recruited the front seven as good or better than any team in the country from the moment Marcus Freeman was hired. And again, it was Marcus Freeman and Mike Elson as a duo. You look at defensive end, Tyson Ford, Aiden Gabera, Darren Agu, and then Donovan Heinisch is part of that. Linebacker, you've got already 2 top 100 linebackers in Josh Burnham and Junior Tuihalamaka, plus Nolan Ziegler, who is a high ceiling guy. But Nolan was already on the board when Marcus Freeman was hired. That's why I'm kind of not talking about him just yet. So you've talked about getting Tyson Ford's top 100 player, Aiden Gabera's on his way to being a top 100 player. They kind of got on him before he blew up as a junior. Josh Burnham's a top 100 player. Junior Tuihalamaka's a top 100 player. And Notre Dame has got all of them in 6 months. And then you took the 2023 class, and you just got a 5-star end from Ohio, and you've got Keon Keeley. That is big time. And this staff is absolutely a force to be reckoned with right now on defense. And getting Brennan Vernon is a big part of that. So before we dive into the film, I just want to give a little backstory on this one. So I saw Brennan Vernon this spring at an Ohio event, and I've got some interesting opinions of him. We'll talk about when we get into the film. But at the time, everybody I talked to down there was like, yeah, he's going to Ohio State. He's going to Ohio State. He's going to Ohio State. Notre Dame was on him, and, they tried to get him on campus, and they were talking to him, and that relationship just kept building and building and building. Mike Elson did a great job connecting with the kid, and Notre Dame had a very unique pitch. Ohio State, from what I'm told, was very much a, kind of you're the next Joey Bosa kind of guy thing, and Notre Dame was like, we want you to come here and be the first Brennan Vernon. And that was something that was very impactful for Notre Dame, I believe. And he just – we've been hearing it now for a couple weeks now, and I've been skeptical the whole time. Up until the last couple of days, I've been very skeptical about whether or not this is actually going to happen. Because, again, you just don't – anyone from Ohio knows this. Tommy Leonard's from Ohio, Matt Dees from Ohio, all these people from Ohio are going to tell you, you just don't win battles like this. Not for a kid that Ohio State wants, not from Mentor High School. And so I was very skeptical. And 20 years of PTSD when it comes to recruiting, if you just don't get this kind of guy. So I was very skeptical about it, but that relationship that they built with him and the message that they sent to him of, hey, you're going to come here and you're going to be the guy here, and you're going to be part of a big-time class. And him and Keon Keeley, from what I'm told, have already hit it off. But he sees what Notre Dame is building, and he wanted to be a part of it, and he wanted to blaze his own trail. And props to the kid for doing that, because what people in Ohio will also tell you, it's one of the states, I'd say it's one of the 5 toughest states to recruit for a lot of reasons. As far as I'd say one of the top 3 as far as getting the best players out of there. If Ohio State wants them, especially now that Ohio State's so good, because, and we've talked about this, there's a ton of peer pressure, and Ohio State fans are, I'm trying to use a nice word because a lot of them are my family members, are, let's say, real intense and real loyal about Ohio State. And yeah, they're a little crazy when it comes to their love for Ohio State. There's going to be a ton of pressure on kids like this to stay in Ohio. And he was able to say, you know what, I get it, but this is where I want to be. Notre Dame is where I want to be. So kudos to Mike Elson for the job he has done. Kudos to Marcus Freeman for the job he has done. And just kudos to the operation at Notre Dame right now. They are rolling on. I mean, they are hitting on all cylinders right now when it comes to defensive recruiting. I mean, they are absolutely clicking right now. And Keon Keeley and Brennan Vernon in back-to-back days. And, for all the people who say, kids don't want a competition. These 2 kids signed up knowing that Notre Dame right now has arguably the best defensive end class in the entire country in the 2022 class. And part of that has been the pitch that Marcus Freeman and Mike Elson have given recruits across the board in the front 7 is, hey, look, the days of a guy starting and playing 95% of the snaps or 90% of the snaps is gone. We're not doing that. I want guys fresh. We're going to cut way down on the snaps of the starters. We want guys fresh. We want those offensive tackles in the fourth quarter being on snap 65, 66, 67, and you're on snap 30, 31, 32, and that's where you really put games away. And they're selling that big time where we may have a starter, but it doesn't matter who starts because we're going to need multiple guys to come in and play. And so if you're Brennan Vernon, you look at the 2022 class and you're like Aiden Cabrera, Tyson Ford, and it's like, so you're all going to play. If you're Keon Keeley, say, well, they got Aiden Cabrera and Darren Agu. So what? You're all going to play. And that's something that's been really big for Notre Dame, and they've been selling that incredibly well. And they're selling it because it works, because that's what they did in the spring. That's what the players at Notre Dame are being told. That's what they saw in the spring. And so when these commits get on campus and they spend time around the Notre Dame players and they ask them that, they say, yeah. I mean, they don't know it for sure because they haven't played a game yet, but they're seeing it in practice, and that's what they're doing. So this is a big, big time commitment for Notre Dame. And the way they've gone about it has been really impressive. So let's watch a little Brennan Vernon film. We're going to watch a little bit of huddle film, which we watched last week. But I also found a clip here from, I'm going to make sure I credit it properly. It is from, let's see here, Buckeye Scoop, the website, the YouTube page Buckeye Scoop. And it is game film of his first game last year. And just so you know, the reason I'm not rocking the Gap Closer shirt tonight is because there's been too much going on in recruiting, and it's now in the laundry. On July 1st, I'm going to go out and buy some more Gap Closer stuff because they're just adding too many players right now to the class for me to rock the Gap Closer shirt tonight, and it's too hot and for me to have the hoodie on. So I do apologize, but yes, definitely Gap Closer material. But let's dive into the film and take a peek at a little bit of film of Brennan Vernon. And the first thing that you're going to see when we pop on this film, the first thing you're going to see is this is a kid that's got really good size. He's listed at 6'5". He's 250 pounds. I saw him, like I said, this summer or this spring up close. He is a naturally big kid. There's no fat on him. He's very defined. He looks older because he's got facial hair, but when you get kind of up close to him, you see that you kind of get past that facial hair and you see a kid that's still got very much a baby face. He's still developing as a player. I think on this clip right here, you can really see the length. Now, there's a lot of technical things he's going to have to work on because, he's a sophomore in high school, but you can see the length there. Very long legs, very long arms. He's going to keep filling out. But watch how he uses his hands here coming around the edge, keeping that offensive lineman's hands off of his body. Really like that. You're going to see a lot of this. He's got very long arms, just like not as long as Keon Keeley, but he's got long arms. He's more of a big end to Keon Keeley's drop end, but you see it come here. Nice burst off the edge. Does a nice job of getting inside with a double move. Keeps his hands up. Again, really athletic player. Actually, I was looking at the wrong end. Here we go. Nice burst off the edge down here. Does a nice job of locking out. Gets around the edge. Nice bend. Gets to the quarterback. Big size kid. And he's going to put on 15, 20 pounds. I mean, he's listed at 250 now. I don't know if he's 250. When I saw him, he looked at least 235, 240 at least. But again, he carries weight pretty well. He's got a frame where he's going to put on a ton of weight because he's not a super defined kid, which, again, that's okay. He's a sophomore. This is the play I really like. This is a pretty big, long offensive tackle. This kid's got long arms, and Brennan's able to kind of get in there. Now, what he's going to learn at the next level is he's locked out right there. He's going to learn to use that right hand to club that guy down, and he's going to whoop him inside. But this is a really nice get off. This is the thing I'm saying. There's some technical things he's going to have to learn, which is fine, but there's a lot to like about him. And I like this clips because it's not just a highlight of all the best plays. There's some plays on here that aren't necessarily highlights, but they're from a game, which is going to help, again, help us get a better view. This is a nice job around the end. Nice use of his hands there. Good move around the edge. Good power player. You can see the size there. See what I'm saying? Like, he's not a super defined kid. He's got a lot of room to continue adding and building to his body. When he fills out, he's going to be a big, strong kid. No question about it. No question about it. Let's get a couple clips here, and then we'll go to some huddle film. It's a nice job with that inside move. So that's just a couple game clips here of Brennan Vernon. I'm going to go next to his huddle film. We'll watch a couple clips there, and then we can see a little bit more. But again, you see the size. You see the power. You see that combination. I'm going to go pull up the huddle film now. You see a nice burst off the edge. You see a kid that understands how to make plays. And this is for a sophomore. This is the thing we talked about with Keon Keeley yesterday. This is a kid who's just a sophomore. Good hustle, good pursuit. Now, the thing I saw in this summer is, so he is a really long kid. And one of the things I talked about from him this summer was he's kind of got a really awkward running style. It's kind of real. I said herky-jerky. I've said in my writings, I don't know if that's even the best way to say it. It's just kind of strange. And you know what he looks like is a young kid that grew really fast, and he's still kind of getting into, like, growing into that body. And that's kind of the strange thing about him. And at first, it made him – it sort of masked his athleticism at first when I first saw him, just because he looked so weird running. But then you watch him do lateral drills, and I think where I was really most impressed with him in drills is when he's working like bags. You know, he's showing that quick side to side. He shows really nice agility, really nice change of direction. There were some things he's going to have to learn technically, and you could see sometimes when he wasn't quite sure what he was doing from a drill standpoint, he'd look a little sluggish. But when he knows what he's doing, you see quickness, you see nice hips, you see good lateral quickness, you see good foot quickness, you see good explosiveness off the line. And the thing that I noticed too from game film, but you also saw, that's a nice shed there, that cut block attempt. But the other thing you saw in the summer workout where I saw him this summer was he's got really strong hands. You know, like they're hitting the bags, but you can kind of watch. It's like with anything else. When you can watch how those bags react to different kids. And when he hit those bags, they reacted differently than normal. And so he's got really heavy hands. And he's got above average length. He doesn't have, I'd say definitely above average length. He doesn't have Keon Keeley's length, but I would imagine he's longer than Dalen Hayes, I would imagine. He's got nice length, relatively fast hands, but really heavy hands. And that's something you want from a big end. You want a guy that can really knock people back and throw people off of him. And as a sophomore, he's already showing things against, mind you, very good competition, by the way. This is someone who plays against the best schools in the country. So, that is Brennan Vernon. I keep wanting to say Brennan Curtin, and I think a lot of you older Notre Dame fans are going to know exactly what I'm talking about, but I don't know why I keep doing that, but I keep wanting to say Brennan Curtin for some reason. So let's talk about sort of the fit here with Brennan Vernon and Keon Keeley, and I'm going to look at it too from the 2022 class as well. So essentially, if Notre Dame wanted to, they could basically be done with pure ends. Now, Anthony Lucas is still a guy they're going to recruit because, as I mentioned earlier in the show, he's a unicorn that can really play anywhere. And so you can use him in a lot of different ways. But when you look at Keon Keeley and Brennan Vernon as a combination, and then you look at them as the 2022 class, I really like what this group is doing, because you look at Brennan Vernon, who's a big power end, 6'5", 240, big end. You could see him growing into a guy that could slide inside on third down. You know, and again, situational packages, not as a three technique as a starter, but like, you know, on third down, maybe you slide him inside like they did with Dalen Hayes a couple years ago, like they've done with Khalid Kareem, like they've done with Adi Tagumba Ogundiji. Get him in some inside pass rush moves on third down, use that power, use that strength. Then you look at Keon Keeley, and Keon is 6'6", incredibly long arms, explosive, has the athleticism to drop into coverage. They can play opposite each other really well. Keon also has the size, much like Aiden Gabera in the 2022 class, where, you know, he could play both sides in certain situations. So is there a scenario down the road where on third down you'd have Keon Keeley and Brennan Vernon side by side, with maybe Brennan playing inside and Keon on the edge, and maybe another player on the weak side edge? Absolutely. And that's what I love about what they're doing with defensive line recruiting, because you've got Darren Agu, who could play some linebacker at 6'6", 225, and he could play the Viper. You've got Aiden Gabera, who can play big end. He can also play Viper. You've got Tyson Ford, who's a big end, who can also play three technique, could even play some nose tackle in some situational pass rush packages. So the thing I love about what they're doing at end is they're getting these super long athletic kids. It's almost like Mike and Elson has a policy that if you step on campus and if you're not taller than he is, he ain't taking you. That's kind of what it looks like in these last two classes. But there's a lot of versatility in this class, in this defensive end group, which I really like, because, you know, there's a lot of packages in my head where you could get up to 3 of these defensive ends on the field together There's also some, and I'm talking even some base packages with, with Tyson Ford moving inside, or if they got Anthony Lucas, you can move him inside. But the other thing, you look at it and say, there's even some scenarios where you can maybe get 4 of these guys on the field together. So think of this situation. So you have, like, let's say you put Tyson Ford at like the nose on the 3rd down. You've got Keon Keeley on one side. You got Brennan Vernon on the other side, or Aiden Gabera on the other side. And then you could have Darren Agu playing kind of off-ball linebacker, and you could move him around. Or you could put Vernon and Ford inside. Again, this is a 3rd down package, a pass package. You could put Vernon and Ford inside, and you could have Keeley and Agu, or Keeley and a Gabera, or somebody, or Gabera and Agu, whoever, as the edge players, and now you're just attacking. But because your ends are not only athletic but huge, you're able to get away with those things. Where in the past, some of your ends were like the 6'2", 250, and I don't know if that's necessarily wanting to get a 4-end package. We saw a little bit of this in 2018 and 2019 at times where they'd kind of go to a 3-4-end package. But what this group brings is elite length across the board. And so I really like that combination there with those guys and what they bring to the table. So let's get up here. Brandon Cuz, we do got a super chat. Brandon Cuz, thank you so much for that. The offensive recruiting has been solid. What does Notre Dame have to do to replicate what is happening on D recruiting? Offensive production, curious on your take. Thanks for the coverage. Brandon, that's a great question, and I promise you I'm going to get to it, but I did want to recognize the super chat and recognize the question. I want to wrap up this defensive end stuff before we go on to the next one. Got another super chat from Corey D. Thank you so much for that, Corey. But I do want to wrap up this defensive end conversation here real quick. When with this. So again, great recruiting isn't just about getting talented players at 1 or 2 positions. It's about getting players, because if you have a bunch of guys at end and you don't have a system that can be versatile, be flexible, can use multiple players at once, and just kind of you fit them all into these little packages, then you land all these ends and you can't play all of them. You only play 2 or 3 of them, and you've got all these 5, 6 ends. What I like about what Notre Dame does schematically and what Marcus Freeman is going to bring to the table is, number one, you can use rotation. So you can play 4 to 5 ends just at the 2 end spots. But with the flexibility of a guy like Darren Agu to play the linebacker, like we saw with Devin Aupiu, who we'll talk about, you can use him together. So that's a way to get a 3rd end and some base packages and things like that. You look at some of the other things that Notre Dame does, you can use a lot of these guys together, and that's the exciting thing. And so what's next for Notre Dame at defensive line recruiting? I could see Notre Dame just kind of saying, okay, we're done in 2023 at defensive end and focusing on the interior players. I could see that. Maybe there's some high upside guys that they could use together. If there's some losses from the depth chart, then maybe you could then go after 3rd end that way. I think right now what I would do if I was Notre Dame is focus all my defensive line recruiting, use all my emphasis to go get Anthony Lucas, and then to recruit defensive tackles in the 2023 class. I mean, the fact that you're basically done, and then also what it does too is now that you've got Keeley and you've got Brennan Vernon in the class is, let's be honest, do y'all think Ohio State's going to stop recruiting Brennan Vernon? Do you think Florida State, Miami, Bama, schools like that are going to stop recruiting Keon Keeley? Heck no. They're going to stay recruiting them. So the fact that you're done in 22 at defensive line and you're done in 23, Mike Elson can stay on these kids like they're uncommitted. And that would be smart, because these schools are not going to stop coming after them. So that is certainly a way to go. So big time pickup for Notre Dame at this point in time. Now we're going to dive into some questions here, but looking at the chat, they have bumped me down, and so and it looks like I've lost some of the questions that you all put up here. So I'm gonna see if I can get to these. So some of these I can't bring up. I'm just gonna have to talk about them because they're not on there. But just some questions. So Chris Built 1218, Coach, not sure, but did your title give this away? My title gave it away, but I did not publish the title until after Brennan Vernon made his commitment, because I'm not going to steal a kid's thunder. All right, Dustin Beauchamp asks, do you feel commitments like this one have an effect on current recruiting efforts for 2022 kids? Dustin, absolutely. I absolutely think these kind of commitments can happen. If you're a linebacker, if you're Jalen Sneed, if you're a corner, if you're Xavier Nwakpa, and you're looking at this and you're saying, look what Notre Dame's doing in front of me. Right, because what Ohio State's been able to sell them on is, hey, look, we're recruiting D-line. We got all these great D-linemen and all this. Well, Notre Dame can say, hey, so do we. That's what we're bringing to the table too. So I definitely think that stuff goes. Look, like we said, savages want to play with savages, dogs want to play with dogs. Whatever expression you want to use, it's true. Top players want to play with top players. And if you're a DB or a linebacker right now, if you're Drake Bowen in the 2023 class, if you're, Tackett Curtis, if you're, pick a top ranked linebacker, you don't want to play behind this group. I think you do. I think you do. So that's a great observation. Black Rush says the impact of Marcus Freeman can't be denied. Absolutely agree. But again, he's not doing this by himself. And that's the exciting thing with this whole thing. Matthew Thomas said, let's go, baby. Just big time, baby. I'm cracking some cold ones tonight. So there you go. There you go. I'm going to get to some of these other questions here in a second. Tony Stangle, this feels absolutely massive. Marcus Freeman is an absolute stud. He is. But again, this is not just Marcus Freeman. This is Marcus Freeman and Mike Elson doing a lot to this. You're not getting a kid like Brennan Vernon just because you're defensive coordinator. All right, so let's get down to here's some questions. All righty. I'm going to get some of these questions. Mike Gardner says, I live 15 minutes south of Mentor High School. This is Ohio State country. He's absolutely right. Huge get. Our 2023 ends are going to be a problem. Yes, they are. They're going to be a problem for a lot of teams. There's no question about it. No question about it. Matty K55 says, OMG, I can't even. I don't know what to say. All I can say is finally this coaching staff is finally kicking overdrive and recruiting good. Go Irish, baby. Let's see here. And Kenny Moore said, Tom Lemming said that Marcus Freeman was going to do this, and my goodness, he is delivering. And he wasn't the only one that said that, Kenny. Come on now. Give me a little bit of love. I can't pat myself on the back too much, man. I need your help with that one, okay? All right, let's get to some more questions here. I want to Jonathan Hill Kema says, this just proves Brian Point that the future cast crystal balls are for the garbage. 3 rivals guys picked OSU. Notre Dame 2164 go Irish. I think I'm in love with Marcus Freeman. Is that weird? Not weird at all, buddy. When you've gone as long as Notre Dame has without a championship and stuff like this is happening, enjoy it. Enjoy it. Absolutely. And Chris says, I think it's Waworka. I hope I got that right, Chris. Get that cornerback that's a 5-star, and we really could close the gap. So a couple things on that. When your D-line is this good, you don't need a 5-star cornerback. But what I would do if I was the recruiting coaches at Notre Dame is I'd talk to Keon Keeley, I'd talk to Brennan Vernon, I'd talk to Tyson Ford, I would talk to Aiden Gabera, I'd talk to Darren Agu, and I would talk to Josh Burnham and Junior Tualamaka. And if you get Jalen Sneed soon, which we feel good about, you get all of them on the phone. You say, hey, guys, you have 3 people I need you to love, okay? Or 4 people I need you to just love full time, okay? I need you to get on Devin Moore. I need you to get on Benjamin Morrison. And I need you to get on Xavier Nwangwu in the 2022 class. And I'm not forgetting about Jaden Bellamy and Jake Pope. It's just a different situation, okay, because I feel good where they are. And then the 4th one is you need to get on the phone with AJ Harris in the 2023 class. That to me is the gap eraser corner. You guys remember how much I loved Kamari Rogers? AJ Harris to me is the best cornerback in the country, despite the class. Regardless of class, to me, he's the best cornerback in the country. Grew up a Notre Dame fan, lived all over, not originally from Alabama, high academic kid. That's a must-get recruit as far as a secondary. So, yes, that would be huge. But I also don't think you necessarily need that when you're recruiting the front 7 the way that Notre Dame is. Sid Irish says, don't forget Elston. I'd put in a good word for him as a future Notre Dame head coach. Coleman Smith said, I'm just going to let it play out. You don't need to anymore, buddy. He's in the class. All righty. Let's see here. All right. So I think I got most of the questions. So I'm going to get back to the chat where we can put some of these up here. Brandon must be excited today. He's got a new picture now in his right there. It says there are some other prospects on the board I'd take over Montgomery, even though he is a beast. There are some others I like even more. That would be Luke Montgomery, the 2023 defensive tackle from the state of Ohio that Notre Dame is on. Got a super chat down here from AST. Cardinal Tate has been hyping up both 2023 commitments on Twitter. You think he's leaning hard to Notre Dame? I don't think he's leaning hard to Notre Dame. I mean, we see kids do this all the time. I don't. I would encourage you not to get too wrapped up in it. It could just simply be he knows these guys and he's wishing them luck and he's excited for them. But do I think Notre Dame has a shot with Carnell Tate? Absolutely. I said that back when all the Ohio State hype was going on. I was just, you guys know what I'm gonna say. Let it play out, right? So that would be certainly a great way to kick off the offensive recruiting. But obviously, Notre Dame needs to kind of get things going a little bit when it comes to offensive recruiting. So thank you for the super chat, AST. I appreciate that very, very much. Oh, and so can I tell you something else that the Notre Dame staff did that was an absolutely savage move? And I don't know if they did this on purpose, but I'm going to convince myself I did this on purpose. Did you guys see the tweet they put out like an hour before Brennan Vernon committed? So first of all, I know for a fact that the Notre Dame coaching staff knew exactly what time that Brennan Vernon was going to commit. They took a picture at the Cincinnati Reds game from Ohio. And I'm gonna read what they said because I thought, I mean, maybe that's just me because that's how I am. That's how I would have been as a recruiter. But they took a picture in Ohio and it said it's a great day in Cincinnati, and then they capitalized Ohio on there. And I don't think that's a coincidence. Maybe it was, but I don't think it was. And that's what Brent Byers is talking about. The staff posting those pics with Ohio spelled out like that right when Vernon committed. It was about an hour before. It was a baller move. They are flexing on everyone right now. Everyone is on notice. Bama, Ohio State, all of them. I love the excitement that everybody has right now. I really do. I love the excitement that everybody has going on. But now, obviously, there's still a lot of work to be done as we move forward with this. Okay, let's see here. Sid Irish, I'm not sure what defensive back from Bishop Gorman you were talking about because some of these chats, we've missed some of these chats because they booted us out. So there's some that we're looking at. All righty, let's look at some more of these. John Kazmarek, Marcus Freeman walks into Ohio State's backyard like Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian and gets another top recruit. Again, it's not just Marcus Freeman. Okay. But Marcus Freeman absolutely right now is just throwing his weight around. There's no question about it. Yeah. Matt D makes this comment. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. Doesn't happen if they truly want a kid. Well, it happened. I absolutely agree. Michael says, I'm also from Ohio, Youngstown to be exact, and you are all right. You do not just get a kid from Ohio that Ohio State also wants. This is huge. Absolutely huge. Okay. Get down here. I don't know. There's some kind of beef going on in the chat, so I don't know. I missed some of that. I have no clue what's going on. Looks like I'm glad that I missed it. Let's see here. Get some more questions about this. So let's dive into some of these other things that are happening, and these are what some of the questions are related to. So number one, Devin Aupiu announced tonight that he is going to transfer away from Notre Dame. Obviously, Devin made it through one semester at Notre Dame. I want to make sure that I'm clear on something here. I've talked to some sources tonight. This is not a normal transfer situation. This is not a situation where Devin wasn't happy at Notre Dame. This is not a situation where he wasn't playing well. Actually, he was impressive during the spring, from what I'm told. They thought so highly of his athleticism that they actually had him playing linebacker at 6'5", had him playing linebacker this spring. So they liked him. There's the source I talked to would not get into details for obvious reasons. There is some sort of family situation that he just needs to go back closer to home. Not the Eddie Vanderdoes type family situation, but a real one like with if you guys remember with Matthew Dickerson when he decommitted from Notre Dame. And it was funny, you talk about small world. So it was a little after Matthew Dickerson left Notre Dame and he went to UCLA, my mother had double knee replacement surgery. And she was in the hospital, and the lady she was in the hospital with was kin to Matthew Dickerson. And I don't know how they got started talking about Notre Dame football. I just tell you how awesome my parents are, that my mom's in the hospital having double knee replacement surgery and Notre Dame football comes up. But come to find out, this person was kin to Matthew Dickerson, and they said that when he knew he had to leave, like he was real emotional about it, real sad about it. He wanted to be at Notre Dame, but there was a legitimate family situation. It sounds like that's what's going on with Devin. So Notre Dame was very happy with Devin, from what I'm told. Devin was very happy with Notre Dame, but this is just one of those situations that just kind of it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So he is in fact transferring away from Notre Dame, and obviously the disappointment there. As far as what's going on with Nicholas Singleton, I have no clue what's going on. Michael Ryan with Super Chat. Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate that. Haven't seen you this excited since I have been watching Go Irish. I'm trying not to be excited, but look, when you're an Ohio person, you just don't see Notre Dame do this very often. You just don't. And, also being an Ohio person, it's kind of fun to watch Ohio State get beat. So, obviously that's big, but when you can get a commitment like this, this is a needle mover commitment, and it's good for me as a Notre Dame fan. It's also good for me as a business owner that runs a Notre Dame website that, Notre Dame's obviously doing well. That's good for me. So you love it. And look, Notre Dame's not done in the state of Ohio for 2023. There's another kid from a public school in Ohio that plays kind of safety linebacker that Notre Dame would love to have. I'm curious as how a move like this with Brennan Vernon is going to impact that. And of course, we're talking about Sonny Styles. Then I also wonder, does a move like with Keon Keeley and Brennan Vernon, does that impact, as we talked earlier, like 2022 recruits like Xavier Nwampa, who's also looking at Notre Dame and Ohio State? So it's very interesting. It's really interesting. Delali makes a really good comment. Are these top prospects starting to realize Notre Dame is different and want to start a new trend instead of going to the usual Bama, Clemson, et cetera? I absolutely agree. I think that's absolutely a great observation. From the people I've talked to, that is something let's just say that's something that was part of the recruitment of Brennan Vernon, is kind of blazing your own trail. And the thing is, look, you win a championship at Notre Dame, you are a legend. I mean, can we all agree on that? Whether you're a Notre Dame fan or not, if you win a title at Notre Dame, you only have to win one to be a legend. You got to win a bunch of them at Bama, right? Lou Holtz is a Hall of Famer because he won a title at Notre Dame. I mean, he's considered a legend because he won one title at Notre Dame, right? I mean, still, we talk about Rocket and Tony Rice and all those guys that won those titles. There's a lot of guys after that we don't talk as much about. You win a title at Notre Dame and you're a legend. And that is, so do you want to be the guy that won the seventh title at Bama and you're just another key part of the cog? I mean, sure, some guys are going to want to do that, and I don't blame them. But because Notre Dame is this close, to your point, I think it carries more weight now, because Notre Dame's just not some 8-4 program that's, trying to spin the whole we're a title team thing. Notre Dame has been there. And it's guys like Keeley, it's guys like Brennan Vernon, it's guys like Anthony Lucas, it's guys like Xavier Nwampa that can, for defense, that can be the difference between that, between getting there and being competitive and then getting there and winning a championship. And I think that's the difference for Notre Dame right now. And so we got booted down a little bit, a little bit. We're going to put a little time out here. Okay. All right. Going to put the drunk guy, whatever his name was, in a timeout here. So let's get back to talking grown folk business. All righty. Let's go. Let's get down to some. Hey, there's some. I understand if there's some frustrations here. Let's get back to Nicholas Singleton. I was talking about this before we got a super chat. I don't know what's going on there. I had a conversation yesterday with somebody that felt very good about where Notre Dame stood with Nicholas Singleton. I did say in the chat earlier today that they got to close now. And right now, closing on offense is a problem. Okay, we're not going to talk too much about that because it's going to come up in tomorrow's chat. It's going to come up on Thursday's chat. It's going to come up on the mailbag on Friday. So tonight, we're not going to talk too much about that. I got to make some calls. I got to figure out what's going on with Nicholas Singleton. But obviously, I'm been told that there's a bunch of crystal balls going to Penn State. That's a bad sign. That's a bad sign for this Notre Dame staff. And, there's some negative comments about Tommy Rees being in there. And again, let's kind of enjoy this one for a second. But I don't think Tommy Rees is the problem when it comes to recruiting. And that's coming from recruits. That's coming from a lot of different people. I think there are other issues going on offense right now. Number one, the product on the field hasn't been as good. And number two, some of the position coaches aren't dynamic. And what's the difference on defense is you're seeing a dynamic recruiter in Marcus Freeman combined with really good recruiters at the position coaches. And that's really been the difference for me at this point in time. Ryan Haley says, Brian, how did Notre Dame pull off this upset commit going into Ohio State's backyard? He had 6 crystal balls for Ohio State. Didn't see this coming. Super excited. And look, Ryan, I didn't see it coming until the last couple of days either. And it wasn't until I was told last night or yesterday afternoon when I got a call that this was going to happen. It wasn't until then that I believed it. And even then, the only reason I believed it then is because I was told that he had called the Ohio State coaches and told them. And that was the only way I was going to believe it. So this is just not the kind of deal that Notre Dame normally gets. And so I was very skeptical of it, but this is a huge, huge break for Notre Dame. And before I get to your super chat, Brandon, I do want to throw this one up there. Tom Balorg said, Coach D, thank Mrs. D for letting you do these chats, especially for breaking on a Tuesday night. So we do sort of a deal usually most nights where we kind of cook dinner together, but tonight was a little weird because you had the Brennan Vernon thing. So we actually we made pasta tonight. We made spaghetti tonight. And so I made the sauce, but she was helping cut it. And so then when the news broke, we weren't done cooking yet. So she had to finish cooking. I came down, I did a WSBT spot, then went back upstairs. She had finished cooking. We had to quickly eat together. But fortunately for me, she has a meeting tonight for her own business. And so I'm actually not having to get any special requests for this one because she's also in a meeting. But what you have to understand is my wife also loves Notre Dame. She was a great coach's wife when I was coaching. I've mentioned this before. She gets it. She understands. And she also knows I'm going to make it up to her. So like I said, I made her pasta. She's an Italian lady and she likes my pasta. So, that made her certainly happy. But yes, big shout out to my wife for helping with these things. And then Brandon with the super chat. Appreciate that so much, Brandon. If Notre Dame is going after Montgomery at D tackle and not DN, then get him. I still say recruit Mpemba at DN for 2023. Any D tackle prospects Notre Dame is targeting for 2023. One is John Walker, who's from Florida. My understanding is that Luke Montgomery is a D tackle, but I could be wrong on that. I do not believe they're looking at him as a D end. He's a big kid. Kendrick Gilbert, who is an in-state kid. I'm pulling up the 2023 offer list right now, which is at irishbreakdown.com. Kendrick Gilbert is a 6'5", 270-pound in-state player from Indiana that I view as a defensive tackle as well. Luke Montgomery, is my understanding, is a D tackle. Jason Moore from Maryland right now are the defensive tackles. And I'm trying to get confirmation on this, but I had been told by a couple people that Notre Dame was also recruiting Matthias Barnwell as a defensive tackle. So I'm not quite sure on that one. But yes, my understanding is Luke Montgomery is going to end up being a defensive tackle. Now, maybe they're talking to him about defensive end right now, but I have a feeling he's going to outgrow that position when it's all said and done. I mean, if teams are looking at him as an offensive lineman, I don't see him staying as a defensive end, especially now that you have Brennan Vernon and Tyson Ford and those kind of players. And then Omar asked a question similarly related to that. And again, thank you for the super chat, Brandon. Omar says, is Notre Dame done with DN recruiting for 2023? I don't think they are. I think they're going to continue to recruit kids and just at least keep them on the board. Like Brandon mentioned Samuel Mpemba, who's at IMG now. Stay on him because, number one, you don't know what's going to happen with your current roster. You may lose guys. You may have injuries. A guy may come in and outgrow the position, something like that. And so you certainly stay on those kind of guys, and you never turn away a stud like that. Plus, with Samuel Mpemba, I don't see him committing anytime soon. I mean, these are very early commitments. These two kids committed very early. You don't see Notre Dame get kids like this early. So there's plenty of time. So I would stay on kids. Shandavian Bradley's another one that I would stay on because I think he brings some positional flexibility as well. So there's some guys that I would look at and say, hey, this is a situation where I could see them cutting it down, but I think it would be smart to kind of keep some guys on here. Ashley Hill says, let people celebrate Marcus. Nobody's saying don't celebrate Marcus. I've been celebrating Marcus since before he got hired. What we're saying, Ashley, is understand that this wasn't just a Marcus Freeman thing. This is also about Mike Elson. And here's the reality. That's a good thing. Because if this was just about Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame wouldn't be having the success that they would have, number one. Number two, it'd be much easier to flip players. So Marcus Freeman can't not only get commitments from everybody, but then keep everybody happy and coach the defense and do it in 2022 and do it in 2023. The good thing is that this is not just Marcus Freeman. This is about a staff on defense that is really putting in serious work and bringing things together. So celebrate Marcus Freeman. Continue to celebrate Marcus Freeman. Nobody's saying not to. What I'm also saying is, let's not forget that this is also about Mike Elston as well. And that's the key. I'm not saying this is only Mike Elston. That's not what good recruiting is. It's not going to just be one position coach. It's got to be the whole operation. And it should be exciting for Notre Dame fans. I'm sorry about this pencil, but I've just been kind of writing. No, someone put that down. I know it's kind of going crazy. It's also about making sure you have an entire staff. So that's where that's coming from, Ashley. And there's no one saying not to celebrate Marcus Freeman. DC says we did have a DN entered the transfer portal today. They were actually playing him at linebacker, by the way, just for the record. And again, we're keep losing some comments here. So if you see that there's a comment before the ones that I'm pulling up, please resubmit it, and we'll get down to it. I don't know if this is the real Keon Keeley. It'd be kind of cool if it was. He says nowhere near done, nowhere. Way more upsets to come, and that's what this one definitely was with Brennan Vernon. It was definitely an upset. And as we talked about yesterday, it doesn't happen very often where Notre Dame goes into the state of Florida. They haven't had great success at Berkeley Prep and beats Florida, Florida State, and Miami for a kid that they've all already offered. So Notre Dame is putting in work on defense right now. No question about it. Tommy Leonard says, finally starting to look like my roster on NCAA. Well played, my man. Well played. Well played. DC says, is Notre Dame the new D-line U? No, they're not, if we're being honest, because this is a situation where you've got to start putting some of these guys in the first round of the NFL draft. What I would say is, could it become that with the way that they're recruiting? They're moving in that direction. Yes. Notre Dame has been a great defense the last 3 years. That defense has been driven by the defensive line the last 3 years, and the recruiting is starting to you're starting to see the recruiting catch up to the production on the field. And I think that's a big thing. And so, guys like Khalid Kareem and Julian Aguara were very good football players, but now you're bringing in an even more higher level brand of prospect. And when you look at what Matt Balis and Mike Elston have been able to do with those players, and then you add guys like Tyson Ford and guys like Keon Keeley and Brennan Vernon and Aiden Gabera, Darren Agu, Gabriel Rubio in last year's class, and then you start looking at that and you start saying, boy, they're up in their recruiting game, and they've already shown the ability to develop those players. What are they going to do when they get the type of players they're getting, or even a higher caliber? It's exciting to think about. But then you still got to be able to, number one, you got to have a truly elite defense, like next level defense, which there's still room for improvement there. But you got to start putting more guys in the NFL draft. They had one in 2018, which was huge, or 2019 draft with Jerry Tillery, but it's got to become more of a regular thing, in my opinion. But they're definitely moving in that direction. There's no question about it. Let's get down. I got another super chat. Appreciate that. Dylan Riggins, with everyone here having a good time, share the love. Give this man a like. 333 in chat. Go Irish. Yes, before you leave the chat, make sure that you give us a like. Obviously, we appreciate that very, very much. Jack Malooly says, as a 27-year-old Irish fan, this legit feels like the best stage of Notre Dame football in my life. If they all can close out 2022 recruiting and land at least 3 5-stars in 2023, sheesh, title chance. So, Jack, first thing I'm going to say is I don't care about 5 stars. I care about talent and upside. What I will say is if the way that I grade, it's a little different. Both of the kids that Notre Dame has so far in 2023, and all 3 of the kids that they have commitments from the 2022 class, a defensive end, all have 5-star upside grades, which is big time. And to your point, Jack, I do think this is the best stretch of Notre Dame football in your lifetime, because trying to do the math here, if you're 27, that would mean that you were born in the 90s, which means you were a baby the last time that Notre Dame was even good. And I think you weren't even, if I'm doing my math correctly, so I say you were not even born when Notre Dame had their 93 team. So, yeah, with what you've had to live through your entire life, 2 playoff appearances in 3 years, you're coming off your second best recruiting class of the BK era in 2021. You're also coming off your best recruiting class, certainly in the last 5 years. And now the 2022 class is rolling. And now you've kicked off 2023 in even more impressive fashion. Yeah, I would say this is it. This is what fans should be excited about, is you have an operation, at least on one side of the ball, that's really rocking and rolling right now. Clayton Stoller, support this man. I appreciate you doing that, Clayton, very, very much. Certainly a fun night so far for Notre Dame fans and all those. And yeah, it's been a good night, no question. Nicholas Galley says we have a real chance to have the best 2 recruiting classes we have ever had back-to-back in 22 and 23. Obviously very early, right? But yes, you are correct. And if you look at the board for 2023, and people talk about, getting more 5 stars, and my stance, I don't care too much about 5 stars. But if you are someone that cares about 5 stars, there's a lot of 5 stars on the board. You look at A.J. Harris, who I think is going to be a 5-star, the corner from Alabama. You look at Dante Moore, the quarterback from Detroit. You look at Carnell Tate, who could end up being there. Brennan Vernon is that guy. And I know Keon Keeley is ranked as the number 216 player in the country, but as I told y'all yesterday, there aren't many kids that have his combination of skills. So there are those kind of players. TJ Shanahan, also from Florida, who's going to be a really highly ranked guy. There's a lot more of those players on the board in 2023. So absolutely. Tool Worker says, great to see this. Is this as significant as I think? Is it a breakthrough? I mean, you got to follow through with it, right? But yeah, this is a big move, no question. Jeff Fluke says, do you think we lay off of Cyrus Moss now? I don't know if they will, but look, you keep recruiting talented players. I said in an article that I put up this evening at Irish Breakdown, it was sort of my state of Irish recruiting for defense, and I think I said it earlier today on the show. If not, I definitely said it in the article. But what I said was, if they want to keep recruiting Cyrus Moss, go for it. But if they were asking my opinion, and they're not, but if they were, I'd say, I don't think Cyrus Moss is someone you should be putting your effort into right now. It's going to be a lot of work, but I think Keon Keeley as a sophomore is better than Cyrus Moss as a sophomore. You guys know my opinion on that. They've got Agu. They've got Gobera. I would put all my eggs in the Anthony Lucas basket. That's where I would focus now. Now that you got Vernon and Keeley in 2023, Gobera solid in 22, Ford is solid, Agu is solid. I'd put all my chips and I'd put all the chips on the table for Anthony Lucas. And that doesn't mean Cyrus Moss isn't a heck of a player. And if they decided to keep staying with him, I'd be cool with that too. But if it was up to me, I say, look, we only have so many resources we can commit. Let's commit him on Anthony Lucas, and let's make sure you get that one done because he, as I've said before, he is my number 1 player on the board for Notre Dame in 2022. D-Rock, let's hit the like button now, up to 291, and we're past that, buddy. So I appreciate everybody hitting the like button, absolutely. The Kinger, 321, the echoes are getting louder. A lot of excitement tonight in Notre Dame country. Black Rush says Notre Dame is building a championship D-line and linebacker core. That is absolutely true. They're getting to that point, absolutely. Sid Irish, when is Darren Agu visiting? So what's going on is he was supposed to visit 2 different times, but I guess they're having some visa problems with his dad because his parents obviously are not from the United States. So I would assume that they're going to try to do something during the fall, is try to get them here sometime during the fall. I don't think that's going to happen this summer because they're getting ready to start a dead period here in July. Matt D says we need to finish this and get Sonny Styles, crush them hearts of Ohio State fans. Corey D, I love sticking it to Ohio State. Absolutely. Tom Balork, who's next? Climb aboard the train. Sid Irish, get Dante Moore and stick it to Michigan. Absolutely, buddy. That would be huge. And actually, I don't think Dante Moore is the lock to Michigan. A lot of people think that he is. I don't even think. Yeah, I'd be surprised by that one. AST, it feels like an embarrassment of riches in the front 7. Let's get that up there. There we go. Kept trying to click it. I apologize. But I think, honestly, though, that's what you need. To be a great D-line, you have to have waves. Number 1, somebody's going to get hurt. It always happens, whether it's for a game or 2. You just need to be able to throw waves of athletes at people. And think about this. In the defensive end class of the last, so they've got commits from 5 defensive ends in 22 and 23. Brennan Vernon at 6'5" is the shortest and has the least length. Think about that. So if you're a quarterback, you're going to have these giants. Gabriel Rubio in last year's class, 6'5". You look at Jason Onye, 6'5". Will Schweitzer, 6'5". I mean, they're just throwing length and just athleticism at you. That is big time. Absolutely big time. Allison T, this is a good question, Allison. Are all of our 2022 DNs still solid commits? Could this make them reconsider? No, it's not, because number one, no matter where you look, they're going to try to recruit really good players the next year, number one. And number two, one thing I think Notre Dame has done a really good job of, Allison, is they've done a really good job of showing these players that, look, if Keon Keeley and Brennan Vernon are as good as you or better, that's fine because you're still going to play. We're going to throw waves of defensive linemen at people. It worked for Clark Lee the last couple of years. I think that's one thing Clark Lee did a really good job of these last few years. It was true in 2018. It was true in 2019. It was true in 2020. I mean, in 2018, it got to the point where I just stopped even looking who was on the field during games. I was like, I'll watch it after the game. It didn't matter who was on the field. They were gonna be able to get a pass rush. I remember in the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State when Julian Aguara went down, or excuse me, Cotton Bowl against Clemson. Julian Aguara goes down. They have to help him off the field. Clemson's in field goal range. This is when the game, it was his first half when the game was still competitive. And they bring in Adi Ogundeji, and on the next play, he goes in and sacks Trevor Lawrence and knocks him out of field goal range. They have to punt. I mean, that's what you need to be able to do is you got to – look, it doesn't matter who's off the field because what happens is, let's say you have 3 DNs to play 70 snaps, and you go, 30, 25, and 15, right? That would be 70. In the fourth quarter, that offensive lineman's going on snaps 60, 61, and these guys are on snaps 15 to 30. You're going to be fresh, and you're just going to be blowing past guys, and that's what helped Notre Dame this past year. So in overtime, Dalen Hayes and Adi Ogundeji are more fresh than the offensive lineman from Clemson, and what happens? They go in there, they 2 huge sacks, end the game, and that's what you need because they were able to throw waves of front 7 guys. Okay. So John Rich says, want top competition, St. Edward's, St. Ignatius, North Allegheny, and Salon. I assume, John, what you're saying there is that's teams that Mentor plays against the best competition in the state of Ohio. There's no question about it. Tom Balork, now this is how things are supposed to play out. Absolutely. Gabe Weiss, can we just have Anthony Lucas play offensive and defensive line, please? They'll be okay on the offensive line. Just see how things go. But I don't want Anthony Lucas playing anywhere but the defensive line at Notre Dame. That would be a huge, huge thing. Matty K, 55, this commitment has to push Anthony Lucas in the right direction. I don't think this is going to have any impact on Anthony Lucas. I don't think it's going to have any impact at all. I think Anthony Lucas is going to make the best decision for himself. And, I hope it does, but I don't see it. I don't see it right now. John Rich, further with the schedule. This is the first 5 games from Mentor High School. St. Ignatius, St. Edward's, North Allegheny. I believe North Allegheny, isn't that where Josh Lugg went to high school? Salon, it's in Pittsburgh, Salon, and Medina, where Drew Aller is the QB. That is tough a schedule as anywhere, and that is what he'll be facing. All righty, let's get to some more questions. Brandon Cuz, what impeccable timing. I love the effort of these guys. Seems to have great chemistry, and I think you're talking about the Notre Dame defensive staff. Absolutely. Okay, so yes, the Bishop Gorman cornerback. You're talking about Justin Rhett. I could not remember who you're talking about. Who's a really big corner. They like big corners. So yes, I apologize for that. Tom Balork, boy, oh boy, that Irish Kool-Aid is tasting mighty good tonight. It really is, but there's good reasons for it. All righty. Some love for Keon Keeley. Thanks, Keon. Glad you're in the class. I was at Notre Dame 2009 to 2013, and it is awesome. Have fun and kick booty. All righty. Ryan Michael says, funny how there were 2 crystal balls from Notre Dame in the past week, 1 yesterday, and now 2 for Penn State today. Who knows anymore? Must be a super close race. Notre Dame needs to push hard for Singleton. And as I said in today's earlier show, if Nicholas Singleton commits to Penn State, the Notre Dame staff better not stop recruiting him. Because that's not a really healthy program right now. They better absolutely stay on him. Gabe Weiss says, why are they recruiting Montgomery as a D lineman and not an O lineman? Because I think they view him as a better defensive lineman. He's a very raw offensive lineman. So yes, I think so. I think so. Let's see here. Larry Friedel was is also Notre Dame grad, 67 and 71. Thank you for being in here. Let's see here. Got some more questions. Four Horsemen. Hey, coach, in a vacuum, what position do you think is the most important to land elite talent on defense? I hear a lot of people saying cornerback these days, but I still feel like it's defensive interior. I think it's defensive line just in general. Four Horsemen. I think you have to have a great front four. Would I love to also have really good corners? Yeah, but look, Notre Dame didn't have, in my opinion, elite corners in 2018. They had very good corners, but look, Julian Love and Troy Pride were fourth-round draft picks. That's not elite. Now, they were very good, but one of the things that helped Julian Love, for example, is you could have him play off ball, which is where he was comfortable, and then have him drive on balls and get his hands on a lot of throws because you had a great defensive line that was going to get pressure on the quarterback. And because that defensive line could get such good pressure on the quarterback, quarterbacks knew they had to get rid of the ball quick. And if you didn't get rid of the ball quickly, you were going to get sacked. And that forces quarterbacks into a lot of poor decisions. And so a great defensive line can make a good secondary great. And we've seen that in recent years. I also think it's a situation where if you have great corners, but just a good offensive line, then you're not going to have a great defense. So I agree. I think it's still important. I think in Marcus Freeman's defense, I would even argue that corner, however, this is the however, corner in Marcus Freeman's defense is going to be even more important than it was before. So I do think there's a need to land top corners. All I'm saying is if you told me, hey, you're going to get a good corner and an elite end or an elite tackle, or you can get an elite corner and just a good end or tackle, which one would you take? I'm taking the elite front guy. And because it's hard to beat a cornerback with the ball, throwing the football, if your quarterback's laying on his back. That's the way I look at it. Dustin Beauchamp, evening show. Let's go. Finally can catch this live, and I'm glad to have you on board. And we did address one of your questions earlier, Dustin. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you very much being in the chat tonight. Tommy Leonard's talking trash to his Ohio State family. Good on you, buddy. Good on you. Brandon Cuz, we appreciate true student athletes here. You all are built different. Go Irish. Matt D, who Matt's known about this one for a while. I'm still in shock. Notre Dame getting a 5-star player out of Ohio, a 4-star D lineman yesterday, and still in the hunt for top players, some of which are Ohio State kids. Ohio Irish loving it. Absolutely. All righty. Tommy, okay, here we go. William J. Stites, is Freeman going to force Notre Dame's hand into naming him the coach in waiting? I think that's going to be determined by what he does as a coach. Obviously, he's doing a great job with recruiting right now, but I think he needs to go out there and back it up with what he's going to do in the field. And I believe he will. I've been, as you guys know, I've been on the Marcus Freeman train since before he was hired. I think he will, but honestly, that's not a bad thing. If he's doing that, that's a good thing for Notre Dame. I don't think he would force their hand. I think that would just make sense. If you're Brian Kelly, I do believe Brian Kelly, like most good coaches, wants to leave the program healthy because that's part of his legacy. I have no proof of this. None. This is just my opinion of what I'm about to say. But knowing Bob Stoops and knowing coaches like him, if Lincoln Riley wasn't at Oklahoma, I don't know if Bob Stoops would have left when and how he did. I think part of the reason Coach Stoops walked away, and this is just my opinion, and he said some things like this, but, coaches say things all the time. I believe it to be true. I think it's because he knew that I leave now, we're in a great position, we're winning, and my, Lincoln Riley is there. Because what is the thing that a lot of people say when people say, like Lincoln Riley's the third best coach in college football? Well, no, he's not. Well, look at his record. Look how they've done. Yeah, but look, Bob Stoops left him in a great situation. So if Lincoln Riley were to win a title this year, Bob Stoops would get kind of part of that. And I think Brian Kelly understands that. Brian Kelly's a savvy dude. So I do think he wants to have a say in what follows him. Because if he doesn't win a title and Marcus Freeman takes over, and let's say he does go win a title, Brian Kelly's going to get some love for that. And he should, because of how he built the program and the fact that he brought Marcus Freeman in. He's got another super chat down here. Presley Laypath. Thank you, Presley. Appreciate it very much. Awesome show. Keep up the great work. I appreciate that very much, Presley. Let's get back up here to some of these questions. All right. Got to find my place. I tell you, I do not like doing shows as much without Vince. Number one, because I have to do all the talking. But number two, he does such a good job of finding questions. It keeps the show flowing a lot better than what I'm doing right now solo. Brad S., this is a very good question, and it's kind of along the lines of what was asked earlier. Great show, Brian. Do the 2 DN commitments to 23 hurt Notre Dame getting Lucas that he thinks there's no room for him? Or is it a positive that there will be good players around him? I would imagine if it's going to have an impact on him one way or the other, it would be a positive. Look, a kid doesn't look at Alabama and he is looking hard at Alabama. A kid doesn't look at Texas A&M. A kid doesn't look at Miami if he's worried about what's coming in after him or is there before him. If you look at the schools that Anthony Lucas is looking at, Anthony Lucas is not afraid of competition. And I also think Anthony Lucas is a different kind of defensive lineman than these other guys. And Notre Dame has kind of sold him on the fact we're going to use you all over the place. And this doesn't change that. Plus, he's a year ahead of these guys. And so I don't think the Brennan Vernon commitment and the Keon Keeley commitment won't impact him at all because Keon's a completely different player than Anthony Lucas. Brennan Vernon would be the one that might impact it a little bit, but I don't think that it will. Plus, if you're Notre Dame, you just say, hey, look, man, this doesn't have anything to do with you. We still want you, no question about it. All righty. Searcher Green says, I don't know if I agree with that. My comment about winning a title. Gene Stallings won only one title at Alabama, but is still considered a legend here. Are you from Alabama? Because I'm not talking about at Alabama. I'm talking about Lou Holtz is considered a legend everywhere, not just for amongst Notre Dame fans. I'm not talking. I mean, every coach that wins a title is considered a legend in his fan base. I'm talking about I'm talking about everywhere. I mean, Lou Holtz is on ESPN. Why? Not because of what he did at Arkansas, not because of what he did at NC State, not because of what he did at William & Mary. It's because of, or even the New York Jets, which didn't last very long. It's because of what he did at Notre Dame. BS 4911, recruiting success is contagious. Absolutely. Let's see here. David Colehouse says, is Anthony Lucas a D-end or an interior guy? My answer to that is yes. What I mean by that, David, is I think he can play both. And we've talked about this for a while. Notre Dame is recruiting him as an end, but they've also talked about packages to get him inside. He's 6'4", he's 275 to 285. He can play 5 technique. He can play on the edge as a big guy. He can play 3 technique. I think he can play nose in certain situations. He's just a dynamic player. And I think they're talking to him about playing the end because that's where you need him to be. But they'll have a package for him. There's no question about it. Let's get down here. All righty. Let's get to some more questions. And this is Matt D's response to Ashley Hill and saying, let people celebrate Marcus. He is. We just cannot forget how important Mike Elson has been to the program. Absolutely. There you go. AST 12321. Are we currently favored for Drake Bowen? I think it's probably a little bit early for that. I think he likes Notre Dame. If I had to pick a school now, I'd probably go with Notre Dame. But, I think he wants to go through this process. Now, what I would say is good for Notre Dame is if these kind of commitments are like, you know what, man, they're doing something special over there. I want to be, because here's why that domino thing happens. And I mentioned this yesterday. What I mean by the dominoes, there comes a point in time where you may know, hey, I want to be somewhere, but I kind of like enjoying the process. But once guys get on board, you say, you know what, boy, they're cooking over there. They got this thing going. I want to jump on board now so I can make sure that I have more time to help get more guys there. Or, I like there, but I just want to play with other top guys, and maybe Clemson offers this or Ohio State offers that. And then all of a sudden, bam, Keon Keeley, bam, Brennan Vernon. And now it's like, okay, there it is. Let's get this done. So I think those things can kind of happen. Plus, you can start putting more and more emphasis on other players. And when you get guys in the class, you can then put more resources to those other players. Notre Dame 2164. Notre Dame is recruiting the way I always hoped they would, at least on defense, and always capable of. That's always been my frustration. Is it's certainly capable of it. This isn't like all of a sudden they're just miraculously getting in a situation where there just happen to be kids in these 2 classes that like going to class. There's a lot of kids out there that have no problem going to an academic school and actually want to go to a good academic school, but they also want to compete for a championship. They also want to be first-round draft picks. And Notre Dame wasn't doing that for a long time. Well, now they are, and all of a sudden, top recruits are showing up. It's not a coincidence. No question. Notre Dame 2164, thank you for doing a second show today and covering this for us, Brian. Everyone gives a thumbs up, please. I would always appreciate that, but of course, thank you for the kind words, and I enjoy these shows as well. John says, Brian, does Notre Dame need to hire a Chad Bowden for the offensive staff? Do they have one now that we aren't aware of? My understanding is yes, they do have one on offense. I don't know much about him, and I don't know if he's doing anything. I haven't seen that. I don't even know if it's official or not yet, but I do know that it took a while to get Chad officially on board. There is a guy on offense that they view as being that kind of player. All righty. And here we go. We got to always have these debates. People act like the offense is chopped liver. They have drafted players or future high NFL draft picks at pretty much every position. Kyron is going to get drafted. Tyree was a 5-star. No, he wasn't. Mayer was a 5-star. Yes, he was. A bunch of four-star guys. But here's the thing, Brent. Then why aren't they playing like that kind of offense? Notre Dame scored 33 points a game this year with all these highly ranked guys that you talked about. These guys getting drafted, right? They've scored over 34.2 points per game at Notre Dame in Brian Kelly's tenure once, and that was 36 points in 2019. And then they fired the guy that led him to that number. So you can say all those things about that, but the fact is they're not putting together the type of offensive talent that you need to get to that level. And it's not just about this player, that player. It's like, okay, you've got Tyree, you've got Mayer. So what kind of complementary pieces do you want to put around them? What kind of system do you have to run? You and I were kind of talking about this a little bit on Facebook. The talent on offense isn't the problem. What is concerning for people, and I think this is legitimate, is what offensive talent are you going to land now that Harry Heastan and Chip Long are no longer part of the offensive staff and then Mike Denbrock before him? That's a legitimate concern. If you miss on Nicholas Singleton, now, I've said, look, Jadarian Price is not a consolation prize. That's a good football player. But the fact is they wanted one of those other three backs, and if they miss on Singleton, they're going to miss on all of them. You look at the receiver recruiting. They got to close on Merriweather and C.J. Williams. They got to close on both of them. Tight end, I mean, if you can't recruit tight ends at Notre Dame, then you got to find another line of work. Offensive line recruiting has not been as good and consistent as it was before. Quarterback recruiting has been very up and down. And then the top quarterbacks they have landed, they haven't been able to develop. Running back recruiting has been better now, but then they went through a 3-4 year stretch where it wasn't good. And the fact is that right now the offensive recruiting is not as good as the defensive recruiting. It just isn't. And instead of getting all this excitement about these defensive players, and you get Tuihalamaka, you get Heinisch, they look good. It's looking good for Snead. You get, it's looking good for Pope. It's you get these 2023 kids on offense. It's like, okay, well, we thought they're going to get Billy Shrout. Now that's not going to happen. You thought they're going to get Nicholas Singleton. And I'm just saying this kind of to make a point. It sounds like, what people are telling me, that there's all these crystal balls for him to go to Penn State. So let's just say they lose him. You look like you were going to have a really good O-line class. Now you're fading for this guy and that guy, Carson Hinsman, and all these other kind of things. You thought you're going to get Tobias Merriweather. Now he's thinking about not, committing this summer. Hopefully that changes, right? And if it does, we'll praise him. But right now, it's not trending in the right direction on offense with a lot of kids, whereas on defense, they're not only trending, but they're getting guys. So, I mean, again, I get your desire to defend the staff, but this is a place where we're objective here, and the fact of the matter is what they're doing on offense is not good enough. It's just not. Are they on guys that can make it good enough? Yes. And like you said, in the running for CJ Williams, Merriweather, Singleton, all top guys. None of those guys are committed right now. If they get commitments from those guys, then we'll have a different conversation. Now, Paul Benoit says, I am not a pro analyst by any means, but I've had a chance to see film on Mateo, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name because I always get it wrong. But he's the younger brother of, I believe, of the quarterback from Clemson. He's a powerful young man. Have you heard anything about him, about getting him to campus for a visit? I don't. And honestly, I'm not even sure what position they're recruiting him for. I don't know if it's tight end or defensive end. I'm not quite sure. I have not had a chance to get any information on him at this point in time, but he is a big, physical, impressive looking kid. There's no doubt. I think he's already bigger than his brother, and his brother's a pretty big guy. Kyle McMurtry, what are the odds of us landing Overton? I don't see that one happening. He is and that's Lebius. I think Lebius, right? That's how you say that. Overton, very, very good 2020 defensive lineman, but I don't see that one happening. And I think Notre Dame's a pretty good defensive end right now. All righty. Matt D, Christmas in June for Notre Dame recruiting. Brent Byer says, this is the most exciting time of my Notre Dame career, 20 years. Just feels different right now. There's a vibe going with the staff and among the recruits, something big as bringing South Bend. And, you said that something there, Brent, talking about there's a vibe. So what I said, I was on a radio show after his commitment before we came here. And the thing that I had said was there's a different energy around the program right now. You've got Brian Kelly putting in more work in recruiting. You're getting players that you're not used to getting. There's a lot of excitement about this team. And although the media is kind of like, oh, they lost this guy, that guy, when I'm talking to my sources at Notre Dame, they don't have that rebuild mentality. There's nobody at Notre Dame that I've talked to that's like, yeah, what's a year where we're going to build and we're going to go to 2022 and have a shot. There's nobody at Notre Dame that's talking like that. And you may say, well, of course not. I'm just telling you right now, there was a lot of years in the past where I would get that spin from people in the audience. Well, look, maybe we shouldn't hype up this and we shouldn't hype up that. There was a lot of that tamping down expectations. That's not happening right now. There's a different energy. There's an energy, especially on defense, that's just a fact, where this staff feels like they can go anywhere. Like earlier today, you had people on the show when we were talking about the state of the program where people were making excuses for, well, look, man, you go to Wisconsin, it's tough to go to Wisconsin to beat them for offensive linemen. O-line U is going to have a hard time going into Wisconsin and beating them for an offensive line recruit. Yet Notre Dame can walk into Ohio State's backyard, right, who's produced how many first-round draft picks on the D-line in recent years, and they can take a kid, but you can't go get an offensive lineman from Wisconsin. You couldn't beat Northwestern for a kid last year. You couldn't beat West Virginia. You couldn't beat Penn State and Virginia. You can't beat Wisconsin for offensive linemen, right? So that's problematic, but still they're close. I mean, there's not a lot of fixes to fixing that, right? But defensively, you're talking about a staff that's just not afraid of anybody. And if they can just get the offensive staff I just think get a couple commits. If BK and Tommy Reese can get Billy Schrauth back on board, if you can get Merriweather and Williams, now all of a sudden you're like, okay, you've got Jadarian Price, who's a good player, you got really good tight ends. You went and got Billy Schrauth. You look, this receiver core is looking pretty good. Driscoll, you got the number one receiver on your board, and Tobias Merriweather, that's big time. Yeah, okay, we'll get there. But they got to close. And I think that's the thing that's missing right now. But if they can get back on track with the offensive stuff, then yeah, you could really get there. But even with that, the offensive recruiting issues that I have are they're not recruiting like a championship team on offense. But if you look at it and compare it to, say, like all but 7 or 8 teams in the country, there's a lot of teams that would love to have Notre Dame's class right now that I'm complaining about, that other people are complaining about. So it's not like they stink. It's just you've got to close to get to that next level. And I think that's where I'm at. But there's definitely a different energy around Notre Dame right now, especially on the recruiting trail. No question about it. Matt D says if they lay off of Moss, it better be because they are all in on Lucas, and that's kind of where I was coming from. I think that would be it. I don't think they're going to back off both of them, but yeah. Let's see here. KMA Preston just saw another bat signal. Guessing that's for another commitment we are getting tomorrow. I'm going to actually pull it up here, see if there are any bat signals. I have not seen any. And perhaps they were for the kid that committed tonight. So I do not see any bat signals from anyone else. So again, there were a lot of bat signals that came out after Brennan Vernon committed. So that I don't know if that's it or not. So we'll have to see. And somebody just texted me that it was Lance Taylor. So if it was Lance Taylor, then we've already proven that Coach Taylor tends to be a little late on the draw when it comes to getting bat signals out when he's supposed to. So I wouldn't put too much into that. And I think all those bat signals were for the commitment of Brennan Vernon. So obviously that was a big one, So, all right, let's see here. Get some more questions. Sam F says, do you think playing Ohio State next season will affect these recruits if it doesn't go well? It could. Certainly could. Will it affect them to the point where they are going to change their minds? I don't know about that, but it's certainly possible. Certainly possible. Matt D says Dante Moore is rated as a top 10 player as well. Imagine getting a 5-star quarterback that has the skills we need would be an awesome get. And you'd get it 2 years after you got Tyler Buckner, which would be absolutely huge. Kenny Moore says, never mind, it came from Taylor. You read my mind, Kenny. Kelly Peters says, I have a good feeling on Dante Moore for no reason at all. I love it, Kelly. I'm with you on that. I'm with you. All righty. Let's see here. Let's get to these next few questions. So, again, I think this is one of those things where I imagine that bat signal was for the kid that the kid that committed Vernon. And Andrew Rhodes says, how are we feeling about Zach Rice after today's comments? I'm not sure what comments you're referring to, but as I talked about in the show earlier today, I think now with Zach Rice, none of them's in the game, and I don't think they were in the game coming into that visit. So I think they've put themselves in a position where they're in the game now. Are they first? I don't think so. Are they second? I don't think so. Are they knocking on the door of that position? I think they are now. They've got to keep it going though, right? And that's going to be key. I don't believe that he's in a situation where he's going to be committing anytime soon. At least that's not what I've been told from my sources. So this is going to be a marathon a little bit with Zach Rice. But what you needed to do coming out of the visit is you needed to be in position where he was feeling good about you. And he definitely was feeling good about Notre Dame coming out of that visit. And that's where you want to be. I mean, that's going to be the key. That's going to be the key. All right, let's get some more questions here as we get close to wrapping up. Jacob Watson says, how's the Devin Moore recruitment going? So, Jacob, we talked about this in an earlier show today. Right now, I feel like if he decides this summer, it's going to be for Notre Dame. The battle for him right now is he going to commit this summer, which I think would be for Notre Dame, or is he going to carry this into the fall, which would make me a little bit nervous? Because if he carries in the fall, it tells me he's not sold on Notre Dame. And he wants to see more of Bama. He wants to see more of Florida. He wants to see if some other top programs get involved with him. And that's usually not a good sign. So Notre Dame's going to need him to make a decision soon. If he doesn't, then I'm going to get a little bit nervous about that. Omar Austin says, I don't want you to bang on the offensive recruiting. Do you think the disparity in the O and D recruiting this offseason is enough to force BK to at least make some changes? And then he says, in your opinion, has it reached a Van Gorder level of obviousness? No, because let's take Jeff Quinn as an example, right? I have had my criticism of Jeff Quinn, but if you're Brian Kelly, and this is a guy you won 2 national titles with, this is a guy you were with at Grand Valley, at Central Michigan, at Cincinnati, and you look at it and say, we just were a Joe Moore finalist. We just had 3 dudes from our offensive line get drafted. Are you going to really buy the criticisms that Brian Driscoll's lobbing at your offensive line coach about him as a coach? Probably not. If you just signed Blake Fisher and Rocco Spindler, and you've got commitments from 2 top 200 offensive linemen in this class, are you going to buy the criticism that a guy like Brian Driscoll's throwing at you if you're Brian Kelly? Probably not. So no, I don't see this as being something that he's going to see that way. I think he's going to probably see it as, hey, look, we've been better on defense than we have. And so, but again, if they can close, then we don't have to talk about this. It's not a problem, but they're going to have to close, and they're going to have to put a good product on the field this year. If the offense underachieves this year, I think could be the thing that could cause Coach Kelly to say, hey, you know what? We've got to make a change or two. And it wouldn't be dramatic. It'd be like a guy here, a guy there, just something to bring in a little bit of extra oomph as a coach and then also as a recruiter. That's how I would see it. All right, John Dillon asks, what needs to happen for the offensive recruiting to match the defensive recruiting success Notre Dame is now having? So we have to understand something about Tommy Rees compared to Marcus Freeman. Number one, Marcus Freeman is 35? Tommy Rees is 29? Marcus Freeman's been coaching a lot longer than Tommy Rees, which means he has a lot more of a track record to sell. And last year, Marcus Freeman had one of the best defenses in the country. Tommy Rees had a very mediocre offense in his first year, and we've talked about reasons why. So I think we have to have a little bit of patience for Tommy Rees as a recruiter, because I actually think he's doing a pretty good job. But he has to have a better product to sell, and that's why this season is going to be so important when it comes to offensive recruiting. But I also think that, and the reason I brought up Mike Mickens and Mike Elson earlier is I think Mike Mickens also has a better supporting cast right now than Tommy Rees has. And so I think it's going to require some guys on offense to kind of kick it in overdrive and really step this thing up. And I think Coach Kelly has to help with that, in my opinion. Jacob Watson says, if we lose out on Morrison, do you think they'll go after another cornerback? I don't think so. I think if they get Jaden Bellamy on Friday and if they get Devin Moore, they're going to be fine at corner. Allison T, do we need to get a 2023 quarterback commit this summer, during the summer? Quarterback commits are typically good recruiters for other players in the class. I don't think so, because I think if they got a quarterback this summer, it wouldn't be one of the top guys. I think they need to have a quarterback commit before we get into next summer. But I don't think so now when these kids still have 2 years of high school left. But I agree with your premise of quarterbacks are usually really good recruiters, especially if you're able to get a guy like a Dante Moore or an Arch Manning, which, again, I don't see happening. I'm just making a point. I think Tad Hudson's considered a pretty highly ranked guy, I believe. Some guys like that, then sure, yeah, they're big-time recruiters. But I don't think you need it right now. And, of course, they've got Keon Keeley and Brennan Vernon, which is certainly going to help. Matty K, 55, with a great observation. That's how Clemson was able to bully Notre Dame a bit in 2018. And this is back to the conversation about would you rather have, an elite, what position would you have an elite player? And I said D-line or cornerback. And he's making a great point. I didn't like Clemson's secondary, and I thought we could have aired it out more, but that front seven for Clemson was nasty. And they didn't have Dexter Lawrence in that game. I'm going to somewhat disagree with you, Matty K, and I'm going to specify a little bit. I liked their corners a lot. They had Trayvon Mullen and A.J. Terrell. I didn't think their safeties were that good that year. So I thought they could have taken an advantage there. And there were times guys had guys open. But to your point, me and Book sometimes didn't have enough throw, or he was so rattled by the pass rush that he wasn't looking downfield anymore. And that's the kind of impact that defensive line had on a lot of people. John A1 jumping in late. Thanks for the super chat, John. I appreciate that very much. But glad to see another big-time player to choose Notre Dame. Hoping to see on one of the 2022 guys commit soon. Would love to see Tobias in. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that would love to see Tobias in. And I think Jalen Snead will make a decision somewhat soon. Feel good about where Notre Dame is in that one. So they're going to have to close there. But, yeah, getting C.J. Williams, getting Tobias Merriweather, getting Devin Moore. Those are the guys, Benjamin Morrison, who right now obviously is looking in another direction. But, those are the guys you would like to see them finish this class off with, and you'd like to see some of those guys decide this summer. OC Irish fan. Oh, how I hate Ohio State. Go Irish. Yep. No question. All righty. Let's get down here for this one. Truman, thank you so much for the super sticker. That is big time, Truman. I appreciate that very, very much. Truman DeMel, appreciate you jumping in the chat, and I appreciate your support a ton. And if you have a question, my man, we'll definitely get to that. So I appreciate you joining the chat. I don't recognize your name, so if this is your first time in, or at least the first time you commented, I appreciate that very, very much. But a lot of excited Notre Dame fans in here tonight. I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. Let's see if we can get to some more questions. And again, Truman, I really appreciate that. Okay, let's get down here. Kyle Dolan says, I missed why there was a bit of a freak out over Singleton. Apparently there's some crystal balls going in there for him. So that's kind of where that is right now. Let's see here. All right. Omar says, Brian, you're my dude, but it's definitely better with Vince. If it's any consolation, part of the reason it's better is to take your game to another level. I appreciate that. Look, if Vince wasn't on vacation, he'd be on the show right now. It was funny, the first time when we really started doing these shows, the first time there was like a couple days where Vince wasn't on the show, and I had a couple people ask me, like, did you fire Vince? I was like, no, I didn't fire Vince. I'd never fire Vince. Vince is my dude. So yeah, and I don't like solo shows. I think shows are better when there's more people on them. We're going to definitely have some more guests on this week, so I'm excited about that. And we kind of had to push some things back a little bit this week. But yeah, I would always prefer to have people on the show as opposed to just doing it by myself, especially longer shows. Like if it's like a little quick, hey, announcement, 15 minutes, cool, let's get it out. But when we get into the shows and stuff, I think it's a much better product when it's both of us on the show, and then there's just more opinions to be given. So that's kind of where I'm at. Brad S., anyone think Freeman or Elson are razzing the offensive coaches that they have to step up their game? Wonder if offensive coaches are realizing they got to step up. I would imagine that they're realizing that because they're competitors. And, of course, when you see a side of the ball stepping up and having success, you realize you got to step up. Do I think the defensive coaches are razzing them? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it. Let's see here. Jacob Watson, this is a good question. How do you feel if Notre Dame loses out on Williams or Merriweather and ends up with Bradshaw and Anderson? So by your premise, Jacob, so you said Williams or Merriweather. So does that mean that you would say you'd get Merriweather or Williams, one of those two, and then you would get Bradshaw and Anderson? I'd be pretty happy with that. To go with the Maureen Walker and the tight ends they got, I could live with that. If you got one of Williams or Merriweather and Xavion Bradshaw, by my grading system, that's 2 top 100 players because I have Xavion Bradshaw as a top 100 recruit. So absolutely. Absolutely. Daniel Wade says, Brian, so what's it going to take to get the offense to start getting gems like the defenses for 2022 and 2023? Thanks, man. Daniel, I think it's gonna take Tommy Rees putting a great product on the field this year. I truly believe that because let's be honest. If Cincinnati gave up 25 points a game last year and didn't have a bunch of dudes coming back this year, is considered the best in the country, would Marcus Freeman be doing as well right now as he is in recruiting? No, he's not. I don't care how good of an individual recruiter you are. If you don't have something behind you that's legitimate, then it's not going to work. Marcus Freeman is recruiting the way he is right now, not necessarily because he's charismatic and intelligent and smart and all the things that he is. Those things help him. But if he was all those things and he was coordinating a defense that was giving up 25, 27 points a game, Notre Dame does not have the class that they have right now. I don't care how hard he worked. They'd have a good class. They'd have some of these guys, but they wouldn't have all these guys. You have to be able to put the product on the field. Marcus Freeman has backed up whatever words he's using with, hey, go watch my defense the last 2 years. You want to know why, I am successful? Go watch what we're doing. Or do you want to know how you can fit into our defense and why we need you in our defense? Go watch what I'm doing. Go watch Ahmad Gardner. I need you to be like Ahmad Gardner. Or not so much that, because I don't think that works with most kids. But, hey, look, this is what I did with Ahmad Gardner. Imagine what I could do with you. Hey, this is what I did with Majai Sanders. Imagine what I could do with you. I think those things really work because the product is there to sell. Your success to be able to develop players is there. Offensively, you don't have that. I'm going to tell you something right now. If Tommy Rees oversees an offense that scores, let's say, about 40 points a game this year, right? Notre Dame is either in the playoff again or they are 11-1, 10-2, and then go to a major bowl. Don't make the playoff, but you go to Sugar Bowl, Orange Bowl, Rose Bowl, whatever bowls aren't associated with the playoff this year, and they beat a Florida, a Georgia, an Oklahoma, somebody like that, and the offense is playing well, and it's the same coaching staff on the recruiting trail next year doing the exact same job they're doing now, you're going to get more kids. Now, there's probably still going to be some misses because you need to do a better job of your recruiting operation. But if Tommy Rees can now get on the phone with kids and get in Zoom calls and should go to kids' homes when they get to those official visit periods, or when you get into the going to see kids and things like that at their place, at their high school, and he's got a 40-point per game offense behind him, you're going to get more kids. Because at the end of the day, these kids are pretty savvy. They're pretty smart. They may say, hey, yeah, I'll tell you a story, and I think I've shared this before. I remember talking to Alize Jones when he was going through the recruiting process, and he made his decision for Notre Dame. I sat down and I can't remember if I asked him directly. I can't remember how it went, but anyway, a comment that he made after he signed was, when I went to UCLA, because he was committed to UCLA. Remember, Notre Dame flipped him. He said, they got on the board and they kind of showed me how they're going to use me. And they drew up, hey, we're going to use you here, we're going to move you around here, we're going to do this here with you. Because when I went to visit Notre Dame, they didn't get on the board and show me how they're going to use me. They put in film and showed me how they're going to use me. That matters. And that's a big thing for kids. And that's why it's working for Marcus Freeman, because two things. Number one, if you look at the product that Notre Dame has put on the field last year and the years before that with Clark Lee, the guys they put in the NFL, and then you look at Marcus Freeman, who's a more dynamic recruiter than Clark Lee was, and you say, you could argue his defense was even better than Notre Dame's last year against a schedule where they certainly played better offenses. There's no question about that from beginning to end. And you say, man, that's something I want to be a part of. Notre Dame has to find that on offense. So to answer your question, Daniel, that's what they need to do at the end of the day to do a better job. Because I actually do like Tommy Rees as a recruiter. I do think he's got a chance to be pretty good. All right, here, let's get some more questions here. Kyle McMurtry says, okay, after Zach, this is following up on your previous question, Kyle. After Zach Rice's visit, he said that it made his decision a lot harder. Is he truly considering Notre Dame? Yeah, I think that he is. I think that he is. Christopher DeCamp made a comment that they're fine at running back. Price is a dude at running back. We are good. Let's get the wide receiver and O-line rolling. So I'm going to push back on this a little bit, Chris, and not on the first part. I've said this. I said this in shows. If they don't get one of the big three, they're going to be fine at running back. I like Jadarian Price. He's a 4-star top 200 caliber player on my board. So were Logan Diggs and Audric Estime. They were both 4-star guys on my board. Chris Tyree, everybody knows I had him as a top 50 player. He's the number 2 player in my class. Right behind, why am I drawing Michael Mayer in his class? So, yeah, they're good, but they were recruiting these backs, right? I mean, we can't just pretend like they weren't trying to get these guys and missed. Because, yes, they're going to be really good at running back with Chris Tyree and Audric Estime and Logan Diggs and Jadarian Price, correct? But would you not also then agree that they would have been even better with all those guys and Nicholas Singleton? Of course, which is why they recruited him. If they were just fine at running back the way that it was, they wouldn't have kept recruiting these guys. But yes, to your point, they're still going to be good at running back, no question. But Nicholas Singleton would have been better than the last 3 guys they got. Now, again, still going to be fine. But there's a reason they recruited them. And the fact is you can say they're going to be fine. And I agree. But the fact of the matter also is that they went after all 3 of them and missed on all 3 of them. Okay. Are they going to be fine? Yes. But that's still a problem. We have to be honest about it. It's still a problem. Let's see here. Tim Hatt says, is there a possibility if, God forbid, 2022 offensive line recruiting falters that it somehow helps stud 2023 guys think there's a better chance to play early? That's possible, Tim. I mean, that's possible. That's an optimistic way of looking at it. I don't think it's necessarily going to work, but, it certainly does hurt. I think the problem is that there's a bigger issue at foot here than just, they're not recruiting this class. I mean, we saw it last year in 2021 or 2020 class. We saw them get 2 guys. They had to go to a plan B guy to get Michael Carmody because they missed out on a lot of other guys. And they missed out on getting a third and, they need at least a third offensive lineman in that class, and they missed. And then last year they had to kind of go to some plan C guys to fill out the class, Pat Coogan and Caleb Johnson to get some of those guys. So to me, that's a little problematic. So I think that would actually then hurt you on getting those guys because it's yes, I think it would help them in getting some of those 2023 guys attracted, but I think you'd still have the same issues when it comes to closing on them. So I think it's a very good question and a very good point, but I still would have concerns about the closing. And, there's some guys in the 2023 class, especially TJ Shanahan, who has a proclivity to Notre Dame initially. So he's a guy you've got to be able to close on, in my opinion. No question about it. Brent Byers trying to throw my own phrases back in my face. Let it play out on offense, Coach D. Agree. And that's, but I'm just saying is if based on where things are right now, we're just having a discussion right now. We have to at least be open-minded to this is concerning. Now, could they recover and finish strong? Absolutely. And I've said that many times. No question about it. David Colehouse says, I'm loving the defensive recruiting. The only thing that worries me is the offense not pulling their weight will make the team look like LSU in 2016, winning games 6-3. I get what you're saying, but again, it's not like Notre Dame's bringing in a bunch of bums. Notre Dame's still bringing in good players. They got Tyler Buckner in last year's class at quarterback, and they got Steve Angeli, who's who ESPN ranks as a top 150 recruit. I don't have him quite that high. Running back, they've got 3 guys that I've graded out as 4-star players the last 2 years. You've got Logan Diggs. He is really good. Audric Estime, pretty good player. Jadarian Price, pretty good player. Last you got Lorenzo Styles, you got Tobias, you got Deion Coles, you got Jaden Thomas. You got in this class, you've got a Maureen Walker, who they like more than I do. You signed 4 really good tight ends that have all earned, well, 3 of the 4 earned 4-star grades for me. I did not have Mitchell Thomas there. You've got Blake Fisher. You've got Rocco Spindler. You've got Joey Tononi. You've got Ty Chan. You've got Ashton Craig, who I like. You got Joe Alt, who I like. Caleb Johnson's a solid player. So again, they're recruiting. They're not recruiting bums. They're not. And this is where I think we have to understand what's the narrative that we're driving home right now. It's that the offensive staff is not living up to its potential, but it's not living up to its potential from the standpoint of being better than most teams, because they are better than most teams. The standard is they're not living up to the standard of, are you recruiting like an elite program? That's the difference. So I don't think it's going to be a situation like that. The only way that happens, and let's be honest about this too, the only reason that happened to LSU in 2016 was bad coaching. LSU did not lack talent in those years. They did not lack talent in 2018 when they averaged 32 points a game. And I've said these numbers before, and I'm going to give them to you again. In 2018, LSU averaged 32 points per game compared to, and this is Notre Dame in 2020, 33.4. 2018, they averaged 32.4 points per game. Offensively in 2018, LSU averaged 402.1 yards per game, and they averaged 5.5 yards per play. Notre Dame this past season in 2020 averaged 448.5 yards per game and 6.2 yards per play. Good numbers, but not great numbers. And LSU in 2018 also, yes, they played a tough schedule. They had to play Alabama, but they also played some pretty bad defenses like Southeastern Louisiana, Louisiana Tech, Rice. So they had plenty of pad your stat games in there. They also played a multiple overtime game, like 5 overtime game, where they scored 72 points against Texas A&M. If they didn't do that, that would have dragged their numbers way down, okay? Then what they did in that offseason with the same players, and again, numbers significantly lower than Notre Dame from a yards per play, total yards game, similar points per game, but went up because you had a 5 or 6, was it 5 overtimes against LSU where it was like 24-24 at the end of regulation, I believe. And they ended up scoring 70 points. You take 50 points off of there. Actually, I'm going to do the math there. Let me look up what that score was in 2018. I'm just going to, because I want to make this point here, because it's a good question, but I want to make sure that I'm accurate here with what I'm saying to you. So they had 24 points at the end of regulation. So I was correct. It was a 24-point rate. So you just look at that and you say kind of what they did in normal times. So they had 421 points minus, so 72. So that'd be okay. There you go. And then you divide that by 13. You take away those 5 overtimes, they're at 28.7 points per game. 5 points below basically Notre Dame. They made a change. The only change they made was offensive scheme, and they brought in Joe Brady. In the next year, they jumped up to 48.4 points per game. They went from barely over 400 yards a game to 568. They went from 5.5 yards per play to 7.9. They went from a very mediocre offense to one of arguably the greatest offense in the history of college football because they made coaching changes. And so to me, that's the thing that more so that has held Notre Dame back in recent years. It's not a lack of talent. It's opening things up. And that's where there's some optimism from me and some people close to the program that Notre Dame's making the changes necessary to at least get closer to that. I don't expect them to score 49 points per game. I don't expect them to have average 7.9 yards per play. But with the defense Notre Dame has, they don't have to average that many points. If you can just get up to 40 a game and then score 27 to 34 points against the better teams on your schedule, when you play Alabama and Clemson and teams like that, you look at the Clemson game this year. Yes, the players were out, but the point is you scored 33 points in regulation. It gave you a chance to win. When you score 3 or you score 10, you're not going to have a chance to win. You score 17, you're not going to have a chance to win. To play with Alabama, they only needed to get into 30s to have a shot at the end of the game to get in there. And they couldn't get it done. That's where they need to be. And I think it's more of a schematic problem than it is a talent problem. Searcher Green says, did he completely retire after being fired by the Bears? If not, why has no college jumped on him for his services? Yes, he did. So the one thing that we reported at Irish Breakdown at the time was Coach Eastan had a daughter, I believe, that was going into her senior year of high school in the South Bend area. He wanted to be with her. And honestly, he's at the age now and he's had the success now that He's not overly interested in coaching again. So that is why no one has jumped on him, because he's not there to be taken, and he wanted to have a year he spent with his family, which I commend him tremendously for that. All right, we've got a few more questions as we wrap up. Brandon, but we just turn to the negative. I tell you, I'm just joking with you, Brandon. I seriously hope the Notre Dame staff is staying on these prospects where there's an immense amount of pressure to commit to the state school once visit ends. Yes, stay on them. Don't stop recruiting them. Absolutely, don't stop recruiting them. Jeff Luke says, as the recruiting coordinator, does Elston help with the offense? Yes, from a strategy standpoint, from making sure that he's staying on top of them in that regards. Yes, he does. Is he helping with an offensive recruiting is he calling offensive recruits? It's hard for him to do that. But now that the defensive line is kind of sealed up, he can help with that. But at the end of the day, if the D-line coach calls you, it's not going to move the needle if you're a running back. You need to be able to have confidence in the offensive coaches. Nicholas Galley says, how is Benjamin Morrison's recruiting looking? Right now, Nicholas, it is a situation where Notre Dame is battling Washington right now. There's momentum on the Washington side. If Notre Dame can't stall that and get back on track, then it looks like he's going to go to Washington, but they're still battling, and that's the important thing. Brandon says, Lance Taylor was hopefully on the phone with Singleton, which is why he's late to the bat signal party. I like that. I like where your head's at. Tim Hatch says, and we addressed this the other day, can you describe further the context of what Notre Dame offensive coaches need to do to finish or close the deal with these high-level recruits? It's just about finding out what's important to them and making sure that you hammer that point home. It's about building the confidence in them that they want to come play for you. It's about knowing what the other schools are selling and being able to counter it. That's really what it boils down to, in my opinion. And it's a little bit of an oversimplified version of it, but essentially that's what it boils down to. But we're on an hour and 45 minutes, and we did the 2-hour-long show earlier, and my throat's getting a little sore. So maybe we can address this again down the road, but it's just about finding what makes it fit for each kid. And it's not the same for everybody. There's not like one closing thing that you do with everybody. It's different for each kid. Revolver 6238, great show as always. Brian, does Pope have a committable offer from Alabama? I don't know for sure. I've been told that he does, but I don't know that for sure. All righty. Somebody responded to Roderick, but I did not see Roderick's initial question. So, Roderick, if I missed that, I apologize. But let's go down to this response to him. Here we go. Yeah, let's bring back Heastan. That's not going to happen. I would love it if he did, but that's not going to happen. Brandon Plesner, I'm sorry, I always got that wrong. Seems like the staff should have pushed for Singleton's commitment while on campus. It wouldn't have mattered. I mean, this is what y'all have to understand. If let's just say hypothetically that Penn State has been able to convince him to whatever reason to commit to Penn State. Do you think that would not have worked if for some reason he gave Notre Dame a silent commitment while he was on campus, or even committed to Notre Dame while on campus? Do you think they would have stopped recruiting him? Do you think that same pressure that is going to, if it does result in him staying in state, would not be there? Of course it is. But what would happen is it would look even worse for Notre Dame, because what would happen is he would decommit and go. And it might even hurt you more because it may take him longer to decommit. And then when he decommits down the road, it's going to be harder for you to get him back in the fold. I honestly would rather them not push for commitments for a kid who's not ready to commit, who clearly still feels about another program that's would allow him to choose a different school a couple weeks later. I think there's a lot of pressure from certain people around him to stay there. Now you know what you got to do. Now you've got 6 months to try to change his mind. And I would rather do that than him commit and then decommit down the road, because what are the odds he's going to decommit, go to Penn State, and then decommit again and come back to Notre Dame? That rarely happens. And I know it happened with Braden Lindsey, but that rarely happens. Michael, I'm not reading your comment because I don't want to get demonetized. All right. Kai S., what are the chances the Vernon commitment sticks until National Signing Day? I have no idea, man. It's like still a year and a half away. Look, and there's no such thing as a sure thing, right? And Ohio State is not going to stop recruiting that kid. For Notre Dame, they know that. Trust me, Marcus Freeman knows that. Mike Elston knows that. But you just got to stay on him. And if he decides to go somewhere else, he goes somewhere else. But you still got to take the commitment, and you still got to push. And I know you're not saying that they shouldn't, but they got to stay on it. They got to stay on, and they got to keep putting a great product on the field. That's going to be the important thing. Tim asks, is there a time when all the high talent and high academic recruits just look at to Notre Dame as the default destination? Yeah. You want to know when that happens? Go win a title. And then that's when that starts to happen. Or at least go to the title game and be toe-to-toe, where now all of a sudden those kids look at it and say, let's just say hypothetically that this happens this season. Okay, Tim, this is a great question. Let's say hypothetically that Notre Dame gets to the playoff and they play Clemson in round 1 and they beat Clemson. Ohio State, Alabama beats Ohio State or beats Oklahoma, one of the two. And Notre Dame plays Alabama. And it is a back and forth game. I mean, let's say it looks like the November 7th Notre Dame Clemson game. But instead of Notre Dame winning, Bama wins at the end. Do you know how easy it would be for Notre Dame to sell to recruits? Look what you can do here. Great school, beautiful campus, tremendous academics, the branding that you can sell from the name, image, likeness, and you can help us slay the dragon. You can help us slay the dragon that is Alabama, that's dominated college football. You can be part of a tidal wave, a change in college football, that you can be part of the let's get rid of Bama thing. That's gonna sell. Clemson's been selling that. If Notre Dame can be competitive against Alabama, that'll happen. And look, Ohio State doing that to Bama in 2014 certainly helped their recruiting in the same regards. Okay, here we go. Domer, or 2007 Domer, I'm loving what Freeman is doing right now, but Elston is killing it too. Do you get the sense that he'll be looking to move up the food chain sometime soon, or is he happy where he is? I think Mike Elston loves it in Notre Dame. I think he's happy. I think he's very happy with where he's at. I think he's happy with what's around him. His family loves it. I think he's happy. Now, if a good program came and said, hey, we want you to be our head coach, would he consider taking it? I think any competitor would, but Mike Elston's happy here. Not content, happy. I think Mike wants to have a championship too. Let's see here. Last few questions before we wrap up. Again, I appreciate everybody. The number, we're still over 290, almost 2 hours in. I appreciate all of y'all. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell before you leave here. I appreciate that. And if you're listening via podcast, if you could give us a 5-star review, we would appreciate that very, very much. Truman DeMel asks, how important is it for Notre Dame getting commits to pick Notre Dame over their home state powerhouse schools? I think it's huge, Truman, because let's be honest, not every kid out there is a leader. You can look at the great football teams, right? And usually college or pros, there's like 5 or 6 just great leaders on that team. But the rest of the guys, I mean, they're talented, hard workers, they're good people or whatever, but they're not sort of that leader, right? They're not all John Elway. They're not all Joe Montana. And a lot of times it's like with anything in society, you may say, hey, look, I feel this way, but I'm really nervous about sharing that opinion because I don't think a lot of people around me feel that. But then all of a sudden your buddy over here who you respect is just like, this is what I think and feel. And you're like, hey, me too. So now, then like another guy over here says, hey, I believe this. And you're like, hey, me too. Now you're a lot more emboldened to go speak up about something because you know you're not the only person there. And I think that can happen with recruiting too, where it's like, I really like what Notre Dame is selling and I really like it, but I'm getting all this pressure to stay home and, Alabama this and Ohio State that. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, Jalen Sneed picked Notre Dame, or if he does, or Brennan Vernon and Keon Keeley picked Notre Dame, or this kid picked Notre Dame. And now it's like, okay, you know what? I'm emboldened to do the same thing because they're doing it, and we're going to go build something special and something new and something unique. So I think doing that is important. But then the other reason why it's important, Truman, is just practically speaking, there's just not enough big-time players in Indiana for Notre Dame to be able to compete. And when you look at where the majority of the best talent is, it's in states where there's big-time programs. It's in Ohio. It's in Georgia. It's in Florida. It's in Texas. It's in California. And you have to be able to go in Penn State, Pennsylvania. You have to be able to go into those states and beat them for kids. You have to be able to get kids out of Georgia. You have to be able to get some top-level kids out of Florida. You have to be able to get a kid or two from Texas. You have to be able to get some West Coast kids. You have to be able to go do battle in Ohio. And you're not going to win. You're going to lose most of the battles you fight in Ohio. But if you can win a Lorenzo Styles 1 year and a Brennan Vernon and a Sonny Styles another year and a Liam Eichenberg and a Tommy Kramer in another year, Sean Crawford in another year, all of a sudden you're doing enough damage to where you're, number one, taking away guys they wanted, which hurts them. But then number two, raises your bar up. So I've always said to truly close the gap, getting great players like you're talking about, those stud in-state kids, Georgia wanted Kyle Hamilton. It's not just about they're here and you just got to catch them. It's also about hurting them on the recruiting trail, which then kind of brings them down a little bit as you're going up. That's ultimately the way to go. And I think that's what getting these in-state kids does, is it gives them that opportunity to go out and say, not only are we getting a great player that's going to help us, we're opening up a door for others to follow through, but we're also hurting our competition because we're taking guys from them. If all you're doing is consistently beating Virginia Tech and Illinois, Northwestern, and Michigan and teams that are irrelevant, then you're not really bringing those other programs down. Eventually, you have to start taking some of these guys from those top programs, and Notre Dame is doing that right now. There's no question about it. All right, see, we got a few more questions here before we get out. Guys, oh boy, there's a lot more than I thought there was. Roderick says, a great defensive line helps our offense because now you practice against that type of talent that you go up against in those big games. I agree with that completely, especially, Roderick, when you have depth. So if you've got some really talented young players that maybe aren't ready to play varsity, but Jason Onye is a guy, if he's as good as I think he's going to be, man, you're not going to want to battle that kid every day. But if you do, you're going to get work. You're going to get work in, and you're going to be ready for whatever you're facing that weekend. I mean, Pete Carroll used to talk about this all the time. Urban Meyer talks about this all the time. Nick Saban talks about this. I experienced this at my smaller level, but I played on some teams where it was like, when you get to Saturday, the dudes you're playing on Saturday aren't as good as the guys you're playing on Monday to Friday, and that makes it a lot more impactful. No question about it. All right, let's get to some last four questions. Keith Waltz asked, do you think Notre Dame has to show more big play explosiveness on offense passing wise to lure top talent receivers? We've seen running lanes throughout the years. Yeah, absolutely, Keith. I think, and that's kind of where we're getting a little bit too early. And I know you had your question in there before I answered that question, so that's why I'm addressing it again. But yeah, I think they have to show it. They have to put that product on the field, because if you can show it, like, hey, look what we're doing with this guy, jet sweeps and tunnels and posts, and watch this scheme that we design where we're really showing these things. Look what we could do with you if we did this. That stuff matters. And I'm going to take a screenshot of these next two comments from Brad S. and Jacob Watson. How dare Vince take a vacation? He's not dedicated. I love you guys. I'm actually legitimately taking a screenshot of that right now, and I'm going to show that to Vince. It is taken. He is going to get that texted to him tonight after the show is over. All righty. Spartan B88. It's a good comment. As frustrating as I've been with Brian Kelly at times, he's only been the coach almost as long as the dark days starting after Holtz left and him starting. I think I got that one. Truman asks, how are the new guys like Prince Collie and Audric Estime adjusting to Notre Dame? So I've heard Prince is doing really well. I mean, again, right now it's still mostly workout. Summer school is not a real tough deal. I've heard Prince is doing really well in workouts, and I don't know if you've seen pictures of Audric Estime, Truman, but he looks like he's like 30. I mean, he is huge, and I don't mean huge and like chunky, like he ate too many cheeseburgers this summer. I mean, he looks like he's a grown man right now. I mean, he has got big arms and thick chest. I was kind of hesitant. Maybe he's the goal. If this guy's not playing short yards or goal line, that's going to be a problem, because he is an absolute beast physically. Now, what kind of running back is he? Did he put on too much weight? That's a legitimate concern. But from what I've heard, they're adjusting very well. And I saw a couple photos of Prince Collie lately. He's really put on good upper body weight. He's definitely filling out. Like, he looks more physically ready to play as a freshman than even I thought he could be. And I thought he was a kid that could help out as a freshman. All right, I'm going to try to just get to the last couple questions, and then I got to roll because it's getting a little late, and we're getting into 2 hours. So I apologize if I skip over some of these, but we just got to wrap it up here pretty soon. But Kevin Thomas, are people expecting BK to leave after 2024 because that's when his contract expires? He has expressed something privately. They want him out, or some other reason. I think it's because that's when his contract ends up. And look, he coaches through this year. I think he'll be the the longest tenured Notre Dame coach, right? And like ever, I think Rockne was other than Rockne, I think he would tie Rockne. I have to go back and look, but you just don't stay at Notre Dame that long. I mean, getting to 2024 would get him to like year 15 or 16. You just don't stay at Notre Dame that long. And so I think that's really what most people – I mean, there's always going to be people that want him out. He could win a title this year, and there's going to be people that don't want Brian Kelly to stay at Notre Dame. You're always going to have that. But the most people look at it because that's when his contract is up. Brad S. says, Brian, if they don't get Singleton at running back, do you think they will go to Judkins from Bama or another running back or just take one this year? I have a feeling they want two this year like they did last year. I would hope that they wouldn't take one. And I like Quinshon Judkins. I really do, but I wouldn't take him. To me, if you're going to take a second back in this class, he needs to be better than what you already have on board. And to me, he would not be better. Judkins, Emeka Megwa for sure, Damari Alston. The only guy that I would consider is I want to see Jabron Payne as a senior because he had a knee injury that hurt him. I think he only played like one game last year before he hurt his knee. I really liked his sophomore film. So assuming he has the academic profile for Notre Dame, he's the guy that I would keep my eye on. But honestly, what I would do, Brad, is I would keep recruiting the guys that you lost. I mean, I'd keep recruiting Sawchuk. I'd keep recruiting Hayden. I definitely would keep recruiting Singleton. So I would do that, and then I'd keep my eye on Jabron Payne to see how he pans out, assuming he's a fit academically and all those type of things for Notre Dame. Let's see here. John Long, forgive me, late to the party. You are forgiven, but this seems to put Moss on the back burner, and Indy should focus solely on Lucas. We did address that quite a bit, John, and I think we agree that would be something that would make a lot of sense for Notre Dame. Not a given, but something that would make a lot of sense. Truman, very good question. So first of all, you're going with the Eddie Murphy reference here. So I'm digging that. Obviously, that was one of Murphy's earlier movies. Is there a golden child recruitment that would put us over the top and make a powerhouse like Alabama jealous? If so, I think there's two. Again, not well, they already have on campus because I think Tyler Buckner could maybe be that. But I think there's two. I think defensively, I think it's Anthony Lucas. And I've stated this before. I don't know if this is your first time listening. If it is, I am super high on Anthony Lucas. I think he is a difference maker. The other one is a 2023 quarterback. I think Dante Moore could be that kind of guy. I think there's a lot of people in college football, and this isn't me guessing. I know this. There's a lot of people in college football that are really nervous about Notre Dame getting a quarterback. Very nervous. Because they look at Will Fuller, Chase Claypool, EQ, Miles Boykin, Kevin Stepherson, the tight ends that they've had, Kyron Williams, Chris Tyree, the backs that they've had in the last couple of years, obviously offensive line, and they say, if that team gets a quarterback, they're going to be really dangerous. And now you look at what Marcus Freeman or what Mike Elko and Clark Lee did on defense, where they're now a legit top 10 to 15 defense every year. And you look at the athletes they're bringing in along the defensive line. There's a lot of people in college football that are like, if Notre Dame gets and I know this for a fact, if Notre Dame gets a quarterback, they're going to be tough. And so I think Dante Moore for me, and I've been saying this. I mean, how long have I been talking about Dante Moore in this channel? I mean, since the first time I saw him, it's been months. He is a game changer at quarterback. And if you can get him 2 years after getting Tyler Buckner, who I also feel that way about, now all of a sudden I'm feeling like Notre Dame's quarterback room is now caught up to the best teams in college football. John Long, I can't believe the defensive recruiting right now. I officially will never buy the we can't get certain players ever again. Dump the dead weight on the recruiting staff. Momentum carry on. Absolutely. Absolutely. K-Mac, wow, what a surprise. Didn't expect this today. Right on. It's a lot of people caught off guard by this one. No question about it. Let's see here. Ronald says, I just came above ground. Sounds like a bad, good day. We'll catch up later. Got to stop missing for sure. What cures all that ails? Win a dang national. I don't want pretty good coach. Look, not getting Singleton would be a loss because they wanted him, but I don't consider it a bad day. So, I know I didn't agree with Christopher's kind of spin up, they're going to be fine because they still wanted him. It is a loss, but it's not a loss where I'm like, well, I'm not going to run the ball that well anymore. They're going to have good running backs. No question. They're going to have good running backs. I just thought Single could take the next level. So to me, if they don't get him, if that's what actually happens, and again, I'm not confirming that. I'm just responding to the things people are telling me about crystal balls. I'm just, for argument's sake, I think they'll be okay. I'm more concerned about getting Billy Schrauth. I'm more concerned about getting Tobias Merriweather. To me, I want all of them and Nicholas Singleton, right? So please don't take this as me saying like, they're fine. No, you want Nicholas Singleton. There's a reason the staff is recruiting him, and I don't think they have given up on him, and I don't think they should give up on him. So I'm not getting into the whole, no shot kind of thing. That's just not where I'm at. But if that happens, there's other guys that are going to be just as important. So I don't really view this as a bad day. You just got a stud defensive end from Ohio the day after you got another stud defensive end from Florida. There's nothing going to make this day bad. Well, I shouldn't say that, but knock on wood. But I don't think there's anything recruiting-wise that's going to make this look like anything but a great day for Notre Dame. OC Irish fan, so pleased, Brian, you deal in reality, not hype. You're the man. I appreciate that very, very much. And I appreciate you using the right usage of your. That and people that put, I'm glad to be a part of this, that make it A-P-A-R-T as one word, which completely changes the meaning, are my two big pet peeves on Twitter. But I shouldn't say much because I make mistakes on Twitter all the time as well. Gerard Berger, this is an interesting comment. I always felt that Notre Dame football should be the Duke of basketball, high-level academics with high-end football. No one can match that. I think that I've always felt that way too, and I think that's what Notre Dame was in the late 80s and early 90s. Now, there are things Notre Dame can't do to get recruits that I think we all know that Duke does, so that certainly helps. But for me, I think Notre Dame could and should be that. There's no question about it. It's a good question from Keith Watts. Do you think we're not recruiting at an elite level offensively or coaching to let our players play at an elite level? It's a little bit of both. I don't think we could sit there and say that Notre Dame is recruiting at an elite level on offense. At some positions they have, and they've been kind of spotty. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I mean, you say, well, I haven't recruited an elite level at quarterback. Well, I mean, you get Phil Jerkovic, Drew Pine, and Tyler Buckner in a 4-year stretch. That's pretty flipping good. You just got to develop them, right? That's the key. But I also think there's positions where they've recruited well, but not at an elite level. Like, for example, I really like Notre Dame's receiving core. I think a receiving core could be really good. I don't think it's an elite receiving core, and I don't think there's elite talent on there. There's no one that I look and say, oh, first-round pick. You know, maybe Deion Colsey, Lorenzo Styles, or Xavier Watts could be that down the road, but they're not there now. And Kevin Austin, you know, maybe could have been that guy without the injuries. Maybe he'll be that again, but it's really good, but it's not elite. So I think it's a little bit of both, but I think the issues are more on coaching. Because, look, Brian Kelly has always said, one thing Brian Kelly has said for years is defense is about the Jimmies and the Joes. Offense, you know, he's always said, I can scheme my way into some points. Well, it's time to start doing that. It's time to start scheming your way into points. There's no question about it. Let's see here. Get some last few questions before we get out of here. Get to these last couple. A lot of good conversation here tonight. I appreciate everybody being a part of it. Okay, Omar Austin says, why is it so hard to get current Notre Dame fans to have our traditional national championship expectations? All of Notre Dame contenders for the title were in the wilderness for a while too. They still expect chips. I agree with you, Omar. I'm 100. I think that's one of the reasons that you're on this channel, because we need to be able to say, hey, great job getting them to this point, but hey, this is still the expectation. But I think part of it is, it's a psychological thing that they're afraid of. If I get too upset with Kelly and too critical, and then he's gone, they're afraid that they're going to go back to Ty Willingham and back to Charlie Weiss and back to Bob Davie. I think that's the fear. I've had so many people say, well, you know, he's better than these guys, or, you know, hey, do you want to go back to those days? Well, why is that the only alternative? Why is this Brian Kelly, or it's back to Charlie Weiss and Bob Davie? Why are those the alternatives? Why isn't, you know, you bring somebody in that can go to the next level? I think it's that. Hey, we know what Brian Kelly can do, and Brian Kelly can get you to 10-2 every year and occasional 12-0, and that's still pretty fun, right? I think that's where it comes from. And I actually understand that. I don't agree with it. I'm never going to be that way, but I understand it. Here's a response. So, Kai, in case you missed this earlier, Devin Aupiu transferring due to the recent recruiting success. No, has nothing to do with that. This is a family situation, a legitimate family situation from what I'm told. And that's not spin based on who I talk to. I trust that to be the case. Let's see here. Jonathan Kasmerick, who's a pretty optimistic guy, says, my only concern is that whenever Notre Dame plays top-tier elite teams, we can barely move the football. We have to fix that. And I agree. I agree. Rob Thidoff. I hope I'm saying that right. Brian, is there a 2021 win-loss record where you see some of those high recruits bailing? Yeah, I mean, if they collapse and go 7-5, maybe even 8-4, maybe then. But I don't see. I mean, look, they went 4-8 and still kept most of the recruits in that class. I mean, if you think about the impact the 2017 class has had on Notre Dame the last 4 years, obviously Avery Davis is a receiver. You talk about Robert Hainsey, Aaron Banks, Cole Kmet, Myron Tungvaloa, Kurt Hines, Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah. I mean, that class has had a really big impact in Notre Dame. Drew White. So, and that class was the one that they built during the debacle of the 4-8 season. So I think a lot of those kids would still stick. Now, they would lose some kids if they fell apart. There's no question, but they wouldn't have this like everybody jumping ship kind of thing. But I think if they went like 7-5, I think there'd be bigger issues than who the recruits are. I think then you'd have to start talking about like, okay, there's a big problem here. Let's see here. Bert Ferenc is 2 hours, an hour and 50 minutes in the show, and Bert is still fired up. I'm freaking out, man. This is unbelievable. Thanks for the late show, Coach, and you are very, very welcome. John Long, thanks Irish Breakdown community. Respect it. Appreciate you being part of the show. John, hey, Brian, get some sleep. Thanks for the show, brother. You're welcome. You're welcome. Kevin Thomas, respond to Omar. I am a young ND fan, actually 27. I just have never seen it, and the only greatness I've seen from them is brief moments in the BK era before getting annihilated when it matters. However, I'm from South Bend and absolutely understand the difference that Notre Dame brings against other schools and why they have the potential to be great again, and that they have the potential to be great again. So yes, I mean that's an interesting take. It's a very interesting take, but that's the thing is like Matt D says, I don't have patience. I cuss, yell like the best of them. I remember the 88 season. And I think that's really what it boils down to for me is the people that are my age and older have an expectation because they've lived through it. And even someone like me who only lived through the 88 to 93 period, you still saw Notre Dame was Clemson and Bama back from 88 to 93. I mean, I've said this before from 87 to was it like 90, from 87 to 91 or 92, Notre Dame and Miami won like what 4 of the 5 national titles, 4 or 6, and 4 or 5. And the only 2 years that Miami didn't win it are years they lost to Notre Dame, and that'd be 88 and 90, and then they won it in 89 and won it in 91. And so Miami and Notre Dame were Alabama and Clemson back then, and there's no reason for me to think that they can't get back there again. Okay, I'm going to wrap up the last couple questions, and then we're going to call it a day. So I appreciate everybody being part of the show tonight. Let's see here. Truman says, I believe we will be in the same category of recruiting as Alabama, and that gap is closing quickly. I think it definitely closed last year. And if they can finish this, and that's the key here, Truman, is yeah, they're in a good place, but you got to finish with Jalen Sneed. You got to finish with the 2 top receivers that we talked about in an earlier show. And if you didn't watch it, check it out. We went through the position by position of where things stand, but you got to get Merriweather. You got to get CJ Williams. You got to get Jalen Sneed. You got to get Devin Moore or Benjamin Morrison. You got to get Xavier Nwankpa. Like you got to get Jake Pope. Like you got to close. Even on defense, you got to close. That's going to be the key because, they're close, but it's just every year there's like that couple kids. You're like, man, if you just would have got that guy. Now they're getting a few of those guys, but there's just a couple more out there that they have to get. And if they can do that, then I think they're going to be in a position where to your point, they can close that gap. But at the end of the day, the gap never closes until they do it on the field. They got to, and this is why I say, like, if Notre Dame wins a title, it can't be one of those freaky years where like Bama had an injury and got knocked out, and Clemson, had an injury, didn't make it, and then they beat like, some upstart team. Penn State makes it one year. Notre Dame beats Penn State in the semifinal, and then let's say the number 1 seed is Ohio State or Georgia or Oklahoma, and they get upset by some team, and Notre Dame beats like Oregon for the title, beat Penn State and Oregon. That would stink because there'd be that sort of disrespect, or even if they won a title, there'd be that disrespect thing of, yeah, well, they got lucky because this, and then if they don't do it again the next year, so I see, told you. I think they got to beat one of those 2 teams in the playoff. They got to beat Clemson. They got to beat Ohio State. They got to beat Bama. to truly say that the gap was closed. And that's what Clemson did. I mean, look, Clemson beat Notre Dame in 2015. Step one, they beat Florida State when Florida State was still pretty good. Step two, and then the final step is they beat Bama. And they had already beaten Ohio State, but they beat Bama. You know, that was the key. And that's when you knew that they had arrived, was when they beat Bama. All righty. DJ Wilson, Brian, do you ever sleep? Very little. Not as much as I should. Not as much as I should. All right. I think that is going to – Michael O'Brien, I like the trend, tight end U, offensive line U. Let's land one more big-time OL for 2022. Agree. Now, if we land Snead, let's get 2003 going for linebacker. Why not us? This staff is getting it in a groove. I agree, especially on defense. I agree. All righty. Truman says, how will the pot of gold recruiting change the game for us, and how has it already? It's not necessarily the pot of gold per se, but it was what was behind the pot of gold, and that was an early, hard push at 2023 kids. And I think you say, ask how has that changed the game? You're seeing it. They got two huge commitments from 2023 kids. They had a ton of the top 2023 players on campus this summer. That was a big reason, because back in March, they started this pot of gold push, which meant by the time June arrived, Notre Dame had been talking to these kids for months. That was huge, in my opinion. All right, last few questions, and then we're gonna wrap it up. Let's see here. Michael O'Brien says, I pity the opposing quarterbacks facing Notre Dame in 2022-25. This year should be decent, but man, this is getting serious going out. I'm telling you, this year is going to be a lot better than people think. I think this D-line with Jason Adamiola and Myron Tungavaloa and Isaiah Foskey and Jordan Patojo, Justin Adam, I think this defensive line is going to be a lot better than people think. I really, really do. Matt D, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on another big commitment. I don't have one planned for later tonight. Sorry. And I think that is going to be it. So anyway, I appreciate everybody being part of this late night impromptu show. We had a huge audience. We got up to our highest number ever tonight, which says a lot about the excitement about Brennan Vernon and getting a big name recruit. Before you leave, please hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Going to have a lot of announcements coming up here very soon in regards to some things that are going on their website, some subscription things that won't impact the YouTube channel. But if you really want to be a part of the whole Irish Breakdown community, some things are going to happen there. If you want to buy some Irish Breakdown merchandise, you can see the link in the description below, and you will see you'll be able to find it there. Hats, shirts, mugs, stickers. Somebody sent me a sticker that he puts on his bike that he rides around every day. A guy sent me a picture. He bought a hat for his girlfriend, which was really awesome. So a lot of gear out there. We've sold way over 50. We're over 50 items sold now, which I'm very excited about. So we have a lot of stuff going on. So make sure you stay locked into that. Make sure there's also a link to our free daily newsletter, which is essentially, it's just links to our 5 top stories from the website the day before. They're always free stories. So make sure you check that out too. So everyone have a great rest of your night. Thanks for joining me for this impromptu commit video. Tons of great questions. If I missed any, I apologize, but we'll be back again tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern to talk Notre Dame football. So everybody have a great night, and we'll talk to you again soon.